open the academic conference of the Cyber Week. We are here at the last day of this 2023 Cyber Week after thousands of participants in almost 50 events during this week, with large events, with small dedicated events, with full open audience for discussions and other debates, and close events with delegations from all over the world. And this is a pleasure to have here this morning our academic perspective conference. In the last year, we saw that the cyber world continued to provide us new challenges and new topics and new areas. There's no 1 week with no issues within the cyber domain, and the challenges are not only at the technical level, but we see challenges that we are about to try to solve at the legal, at the regulation aspects, other policy issues and things like this. And the research world also follow the new challenges and the domains that appear during this evolvement. We see that the days that are not so shining at the industry in the last year, also we would expect to send or to direct more people to join us to research aspects of cyber, and this is interesting and bring us more topics to look at. We see topics that during this year went down in the world, like blockchain and others that were so at the top of our mind before, and right now, at least at the industry level, looks a bit different. And on the other side, we see how AI became like top of the discussions. All the aspects from Gen AI and other topics of how to protect the AI, how the AI can help us to protect our systems, and how the AI can help the attackers to be more effective. So with all these areas, this is quite full of new ideas and challenges, and we here at the ICRC also involved in many of these topics. The ICRC is the Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center that we have here in Tel Aviv University, in which runs many projects and research initiatives, and connect to all the university faculties and departments. And in interdisciplinary aspect stands for the fact that we combine all aspects of cyber, not just the technical, but also policy, legal, behavioral, psychological aspects, and many others. And these are the things that we are going to touch also today. On top of the research initiatives that we have collaborations that we are super proud of. These collaborations, and part of our collaborators are here at the audience. We have a running program for already 5 years with our colleagues from Singapore that are here and will present. We have running the beginning of even more than the beginning. We have a collaboration program with our colleagues from the Emirates that the representative is here and going to present, and also others that are on the building these relations and collaboration. We are proud of these collaborations. We are proud of the research, and we very much about the impact of all these research efforts. I can try like this. Okay, and we are also very looking not just at the research and the collaborations, but also the impact that can come out of the efforts and the research aspects that we have. With that, we are about to start soon our agenda. We have today a collection of leading speakers and topics with people that are really leading their domains in the world, and we are proud to have you here with us here in Tel Aviv. And before starting our agenda, I have the pleasure to invite two to greet us. So the first one, we have our Tel Aviv University provost here that with a deep background in technology, in information and communication technologies, can look today at the entire university with all the disciplines. So this is my pleasure to have you here, our provost, Professor Mark Steif. Please.
Thank you, Yaniv. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to host this event, the Cyber Week. Many of you may know that Tel Aviv University is the largest university in Israel. It is also the most diverse university in Israel, with the largest number of areas of teaching programs and research topics that are being explored here. We have a very strong technical side that does technology, engineering, computer science, exact sciences, etc. And also we are strong in law and humanities, social sciences, and all those fields care very much about cyber. It's a very important topic for all these fields, and it's been almost a decade since cyber has become a focal point at this university, thanks to people like Itzik Ben Israel, who's been pushing it from the beginning. And we see a lot of importance. This is one of the important fields that we're dealing with, and in particular, the Cyber Week has produced, we had an opportunity to display a large number of results that are academically interesting, but also results or ideas that have influenced policymakers, and this is also something that we are very proud of. So I won't take much of your time. I'll just thank you for being here once again, and I'll thank Itzik Ben Israel for leading this effort for so many years, and of course Yaniv Arel, the chair of this conference. And I want to thank the speakers and the audience. And I see that Israelis wake up later than people who are coming from other countries, but enjoy the conference, and thank you.
Thank you, Professor Steif. And the second one that I want to invite to the stage is the one who is the leader of, on one hand, our center, on the other hand, the Cyber Week, and has a lot of influence and impact on how the cyber in general is here in Israel and also in several other countries. So it's my pleasure to invite Professor Itzik Ben Israel to the stage, please.
Good morning. I think we have already met in the last week in what we call events of Cyber Week. We call the whole project a conference, so we need certain name for the events. Okay, sessions, sometimes events. While we are speaking now, there are 3 or 4 parallel events. One for cyber and transportation. One which I don't know if you're familiar with, B-Sides. It's mainly intended for young people, new ideas, who would like to know more about hacking and how to deal with it, etc., etc. This is in Smolaj, the main hall, and another one. I mean, this is the characteristic of the whole week. I was participating in, I gave some keynote speech 2 weeks ago in Switzerland, and I must repeat something I heard from one of the speakers. This man is the guy who is in charge of coordinating all the research of NVIDIA. And he spoke about new developments in cybersecurity, AI mainly, and how it is now applied in this or that way to the GPUs and chips, etc., that NVIDIA is developing. And what I would like to quote from his talk is that he ended it by saying, while I was on the stage speaking to you, I got several WhatsApps and emails, which made everything I told you already obsolete. And this is perhaps a little bit exaggerated, but it has something real. I mean, this field, computer science generally, and those aspects of that we call cybersecurity or AI, etc., is advancing so fast that it's very difficult to stay updated and know everything that is going on. And of course, this means that what we call the academic perspective of it, which usually this is the way how we start developing new ideas, starting from an innocent paper. The academic is more important than in many other areas. This is the last day. I hope you come next year again, and I hope that you enjoyed the previous 4 days. And let me remind you that on top of an yearly Cyber Week conference that we have, usually last week of June, we are having also what we call AI conference, and the two have a lot of overlapping areas. We are having an AI Week conference every February. So I hope to see you there again. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Itzik. Just to share with you that first, this conference is recorded. So on top of the people that are participating here this morning, so this will be online later. So as we know, the impact and the people who gets part of the information and the ideas that are shared in this conference are much more than the people in this hall. And with that, we are going to start our agenda. We have a packed agenda. We gave each one of our speakers around 18 minutes to talk, so this is really condensed, and we'll probably will not have time for questions after every lecture, but this is for the sake of hearing more ideas and the concept this morning, and we'll try to manage the agenda, and we'll have a break at 11 with some coffee and refreshments outside. So with that, we are going to start, and our first speaker will be Professor Damiani, that he is the leader of the center of Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi, and he also a full professor in Milan. He has a lot of achievements in the AI, machine learning, cyber physical systems, and others, and he leads the collaboration with us. So please, Ernesto, we are happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you. I'm terrified by the notion of the 18 minutes, so I will try to give you an idea in this. Okay, wonderful. Okay, it's on. I will try to give you an idea. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's always a big pleasure to be in Tel Aviv, and every time I come, I discover something new. It's really a very interesting experience. But having 18 minutes, I don't have much time for pleasantries, so I will jump right into the point. So what I will try to give you is the idea of our perspective. This is a perspective which is, well, it's a two-way perspective because it is a collaboration or things that happen both on one side in Europe and the other side in the UAE, and where we are already starting working with the third important collaboration, which is the one with the Tel Aviv University specifically. So here you see all the list of my qualifications. But basically what we are trying to do, we want to handle applications in an environment which is a new environment that also creates a new security context. And it is a new environment for two reasons. One reason is that we are delivering the thing on the cloud continuum. Cloud continuum means that part of the services, the software services that we deliver will be on devices, part of them will be on the edge, part of them will be on the network, and this is the new part. So when you see core in this slide, you will see the place where some of the services can be deployed. They are deployed on the operator networks. Why? Because this way they can be closer to the place where the people are asking for the services, and we can keep the latency at a minimum. And finally, some of the services will be, as today, on the internet. So this is the cloud continuum scenario. We have a large series I will show you of applications that need to go on that scenario, and some of them are artificial intelligence applications. So basically, trying to move this thing. Okay. No, I pressed the wrong. Okay. So this is the cloud continuum thing, and it has a new scenario for application deployment, because we need to deploy the application not traditionally on machines. The applications are deployed in an environment we don't know entirely at the deployment. Even at deployment time, you don't know, because in the end, the final place where you put the service can be everywhere on the network, and the actual environment where the service will be executed, you don't have full control even at deployment time. So this is the deployment scenario that we are looking at. A scenario in which we have data collection in the periphery, we have some pre-processing at the edge on the network, some pre-processing of data quality done on the network itself, and finally maybe some big model working in the cloud. And all this is the type of place we want to build where we want to deliver those applications. And in the UAE, of course, this is one of the topics. But for the moment, we have done it in Milan. So this is the example of the application that we built with the help of a local operator. You see up there, the team is the largest operator, mobile operator in Italy. At the moment, it's an experimental place which is it's deployed in the former site of Expo 2015. Maybe you've seen that one in Milan. Years ago, we had the Expo in Milan, and that's the Tree of Life. So how is it done? We have a few cells, a couple of central stations where we can deploy the services, plus we have the network support. And what we do there is the experimentation of asking for a service in cell A, delivering the service in cell B. And all this, the service request must travel from the periphery to the center, and then the answer, which could be moving a robotic arm, for example, so it has a latency constraint, it has to travel all the way back within an allotted time. Otherwise, it's useless. If you take a good decision, but too late, it will not work. So this is what we are doing. We deployed a number of services that can go, which services go on the periphery? Data quality, data gathering, data, but also security ones, data protection ones that will preserve the confidentiality of the data. And which services go on the network? The services that need to be answered fast. So from the point of view of the user organization, they have to organize the services they want in containers, and then having a dynamic deployment of the containers across the network. So the containers can be deployed at the periphery, can be deployed on the network, can be deployed at the center. And it's revisiting a concept that, well, I remember it when I was a student, the concept of orchestration. Orchestration means that we have to put together all these services invocations to achieve a single purpose across, a process type of organization. Orchestration is the simplest way to organize a process where the services are located in different areas, in different places. And these orchestrations are the new security context, because we must make sure that this orchestration will happen securely. Securely from several points of view. And Let me just give you an example. We are talking, of course, orchestrations across the cloud continuum. We don't have at the moment a single orchestrator that can run services on devices, at the edge, on the network, and at the cloud at the same time. We have to compose single individual orchestration targeting the different environment for the moment. And there is a lot of discussion in the community at the moment how we can get some sort of a high-level standard for orchestrations that will address all the places. But let's focus on the cloud-based orchestration, which is also doable on the core network, which is the Kubernetes style. And I will try to give you an idea of the type of security problems. But since I have short time, let me say from the beginning that we have two types of problems. One problem is linked to interference between one orchestration and the next. The second type is someone injecting wrong data at a certain point of the process. So this is especially important for distributed processes that involve artificial intelligence data. At the moment, you know that the killer use case is federated learning. Everybody wants to do federated learning. And you understand that federated learning can be run on this scenario that I told you, but it poses all the security problems that I mentioned. So here we have some example of attacks that have been carried out. At the moment in the wild, we have just two types of attacks that have been carried out successfully. One type is the eavesdropping of one orchestration from another. And the other type is denial of service attacks. Especially denial of service attacks have been documented in the wild. But you may remember the crypto jacking attack at Tesla. That was one that made the headlines. Okay, so I have a few threat models here, and I won't try to describe them. As I told you, we are in this scenario, big data pipelines executed on the cloud continuum. This is going to be the market standard, in my opinion, of the future, and this creates a security context. And you need to make it secure. We have problems like this, problems about namespace and policies that will, if you implement the pipeline and deploy it carelessly, it may happen that the pipelines can interfere and the data of one can be visible to another. Misconfigured access control, normally you do role-based access control, and this is also a typical scenario, threat model. I don't want to go into the details, but these are all documented examples of orchestrations, weaknesses, failure modes of orchestration that become more and more important in the scenario that we are discussing. Denial of service is also a problem, because remember, when you have a pipeline like this, you will never be sure where the data collection will be done. It's done at the periphery, but on which network? It's a 5G place, okay? So there are 50 companies operating the network, and the final place where your data collection service, for example, we run a very popular data service that does just, a little bit of data quality on the sensors. That type of service will be executed in the periphery on the network of an operator. Which one? You don't know a priori. If your customer is moving, for example, you are talking mobile vehicles, you are talking, we have a nice project which is called Hospital in the Ambulance, in which we run services on the patient data while the ambulance is moving around the city. That's in the UAE. Well, for this one, you don't know a priori in which cell your data collection and data improvement service will be actually executed at runtime. So the problem is that even if you trust one operator, do you trust the community of the operators? And this is a problem we need to sort of handle. Okay, so this is one of the sample. I think I have still 2 minutes to make this a little bit more concrete. This is an example. We have a fine-grained and coarse-grained federated learning based on people data. Fine-grained means that the local model is on the phones. Coarse-grained means that the local model is on some virtual server where you actually do the local model development. You do the development of a local AI model, and then you do some sort of collaborative exchange of the parameters. The classic one is a federated average, in which you just make the average of the parameters of the models in the periphery. So this is a typical situation, and we would like to be able to have a community of different points that can become part of this they can train their local model and enter into the exchange of the parameters of their model with the parameters of the model of the others. This is done in collaboration with a large company that is also active in the Middle East, but they do imaging centers for diagnosis. So you wanted to be able to run a local model and to exchange the parameters with everyone else in the community. And the notion is that, well, yeah, this data, do you really, well, that's a problem in putting them on the network for a number of reasons. And especially because, okay, these are not primary data, these are secondary data, these are parameters of AI models that you exchange. You don't exchange the patient data. On the other hand, there's IP. You don't want people to interfere with those data. You don't want some pseudo-hospital to become part of the community just to inject data that can be malicious. And okay, so these are the requirements. And no, so now, how do you enforce any security control on a scenario like this? I have maybe a couple of minutes just to tell you about this. Well, in the traditional way, what you are trying to do, you are looking at what algorithm you are going to execute on the network. You know what are the data that are exchanged, and basically you have exchanges. Here, let me give you an example. I want to decide which is the redundancy. Where will I put the service instances on the network? And I'm looking at the requirements on where, for example, a new hospital comes up. I need to put a data edge service for that hospital on the cell where that hospital is located. So I have to sort of create the instances dynamically. Can I do it as an optimization problem? And the answer is no, not really. Because the optimization problem in this case will not take into account trust, will not take it, and the cost function is very difficult to compute. So what we are doing is we are trying to use machine learning exactly for that reason. Take the decision about the non-functional property of the computation based on previous experience and examples. So this is my, not really final, but one of my final slides. We have at the moment a situation in which we are containerizing the services. The services are all containerized at the development site. We manually position those services on the network where they are needed. This is a manual decision, and you also put the security controls on those particular instances of the services that you think should be equipped with them. For example, you put encryption, you put authentication, strong or weak. I will do less than 5. Manual. Will it scale? No. We have only 4 cells at the moment active in the mind experimentation setting. We created the containers. We deploy the containers manually. There is a person who decides whether a certain service should be replicated or not, and for each replica, which is the security configuration that the replica should have. At the moment, generally speaking, we think that this type of decision, where to put the replicas and which is the security configuration for each replica, will need to be taken by some intelligence in the network. So this is what we call natively intelligent network. Of course, this type of idea, which is the one that we will be discussing with Tel Aviv University, is an idea which has its own problems. You wanted to leave the decision of which will be the security controls to be deployed in a given instance to some intelligence, which is not you. Because that replication decision, you may have 5,000 replication decisions to take in a given 500 millisecond interval. So you can't really have someone sitting in a center deciding which container. Remember, when we deploy the container, it already has the security control inside. So which container? Is that the robust type A or the robust type B that we are going to deploy? And we can't always deploy the full container configuration, not sustainable. You can't just say, okay, let's deploy the redundant way, everything everywhere. No, it won't work. It won't work from the sustainable point of view. Even the energy that is required to run the top-level containers, you can't really just take it for granted everywhere. So you need to customize the configuration of the containers before deciding making the deployment decision. And this is something that we need to do. At the moment, we had an initial problem. in which, of course, these models that decide how to deploy the hardened container and with which hardening, these models need to be themselves robust. Robust in the sense that even if they have incomplete information about what's going on in the network, they won't let you down entirely. At the moment, we have a project called Palm, and this is the one where TAU is involved, but we want to have a fuller statement of intelligent robustness or robust intelligence, how you off the network when deploying the data pipelines. Where shall we work? This is the horizon we have. We have 3 years in front of us. As I told you, these are back-end AI models, are the AI models that govern, decide the deployment of the other models, which are the application models. And what they decide mostly is when and where and what. So the 3 W's, when to deploy a new instance, where to put it, and of course, what hardening for each individual instance, what is the security context for that particular instance that we will use. I see 1 minute, and I'm very proud to say that this was my last slide. Thank you very much for having me this morning. It was a pleasure again to be here.
Thank you so much, Professor Damiani. And you could see what's a variety of topics and initiatives are as part of the Khalifa University and the center. And one of them that we are connected to the university with AI that used to identify compromised devices. Will be presented next month in an IEEE conference in Europe, a joint paper of the 2 universities. So thank you very much. And we are moving to take a bit of also legal aspects to our discussion. And with that, and not only legal, but also the bio side of the science. So it's my pleasure to invite Prof. Dov Greenbaum, who is the Associate Researcher at the Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry at Yale University, as well as the Director at the Institute for Legal Implications of Emerging Technology at Reichman University here in Israel. And this is my pleasure to invite you, Dov Greenbaum, please.
Well, that's getting set up. This morning, I by mistake took my wife's cell phone, and I took my phone, so now she has no phones. And I was thinking on the train ride down, like, how can I incorporate this into my talk? And I was thinking, well, you know, part of the issue with the talk that I'm going to be talking about is cybersecurity. Part of the issue is we're all biological systems, and biological systems, by definition, are somewhat unreliable and unpredictable. And so here, I took my wife's cell phone, so if I get a call, it's not for me, it's for her. I have to make sure that all her calls go through. I'm going to be giving a talk about cybersecurity, and I'll describe what that is. Just quick about me. So, like it was said, I run the Tzvi Institute for Legal Implications of Emerging Technologies. We're an interdisciplinary center at Reichman University, just a little bit north of here. And broadly speaking, we look at the ethical, legal, and social implications of all emerging technologies. I was introduced as also being a geneticist, molecular biologist. By training, I was in bioinformatics, and the reason I got into law was actually a cybersecurity issue, which was that I was doing research, as I was wont to do, and I essentially, with there's a simple Perl script, I hacked into, well, hack is a strong word. I got into a important database that I needed access to for my research, and we were threatened with lawsuits, and my university at the time, Yale, was exceedingly upset at me I don't know why. I started thinking, well, maybe there's some interesting legal things beyond just the bioinformatics and the genomics of it. And so I kind of got into law, practiced law for a number of years, and now, again, I'm back at Reichman. So the reason I'm talking about biosecurity is actually I just published a book on biocybersecurity. It's available. I don't get royalties, so buy it if you want. It's pretty pricey for what it is, but nevertheless, it's a book on this area, which is biocybersecurity. What is that? Well, biocybersecurity sort of deals with what we call the bioeconomy. And broadly speaking, what is the bioeconomy? Nobody knows. Interestingly enough, the US government has 3 separate and distinct and totally different sort of definitions of what the bioeconomy is. The Europeans have another definition of what the bioeconomy is, but overall, what is the bioeconomy? It's essentially some sort of integration of all things biology within the economy, hence the name. So that includes things like employing biological resources, which include agriculture and also things that are synthetic biology, for health outputs, so developing drugs, for manufacturing, so in the entire manufacturing process, for food, so ag tech and food tech, and of course for energy, so in biofuels and the like. And that entire area together becomes what I like to call the bioeconomy. And again, this is not a real definition. There is no good definition. In fact, there is now a committee to decide what should be the definition, at least in the U.S. government, of what is the bioeconomy. Nevertheless, whatever the bioeconomy is, supposedly, at least right now in the U.S., it's worth over $1 trillion. And worldwide, in the next couple of years, it's supposed to be on the order of $30 trillion. So whatever it is, it's huge. Within the bioeconomy, then, we therefore have issues that are related to the cybersecurity aspects of it. And of course, why is that any different than just cybersecurity in general? Well, first of all, academics like to silo themselves and like to develop little sort of groups, and they want to have their own sort of definitions of things. But more so, to some degree, the issues that are associated with the bio aspects in cybersecurity are slightly different than in other sorts of fields. So, for example, going back to why I'm here today, biolabs tend to have a lot more information than they had a couple years ago. There has been a big data explosion in the area of biotechnology and in the area of biology in general. So historically, physics and high energy physics was where all the data was. Over the last 10, 15 years, biology has sort of blown up in terms of the amount of data that's being created. And as a result of that, you have now a lot of labs that are slowly ramping up in terms of their security issues. And there are a lot of real security issues in these bio labs, a lot of real security issues in the whole bio pipeline, whether or not it starts at the local level in ag tech and in food tech, or goes all the way up to like large pharmaceutical companies. There are real issues that have to be dealt with. So, for example, here is this is something from the National Academies of Science in the U.S. Describing, this is already 2 years ago, describing how they have to safeguard the bioeconomy. Now, of course, they didn't say anything about biocybersecurity in here. There wasn't anything interesting in the entire book. I looked. I apologize if this is being streamed and someone read it. By the way, now that I realize it, I should apologize. I speak quickly. I watch Netflix at like 1.5, YouTube at like 2.5. And so my mind thinks that I'm speaking the right speed, but I'm probably not. So I want to apologize in advance. This past year, President Biden put out sort of an executive, what do they call them? I should know. He made an executive order essentially saying that we have to advance a biotechnology, biomanufacturing initiative, and of course that creates more sort of cybersecurity issues in the area of the bioeconomy. And what did Biden say? Of course, he has to wear his aviators. Global industry is on the cusp of an industrial revolution powered by biotechnology. So essentially, whatever has been until now is just going to explode in terms of biotech and in terms of the bioeconomy. And as a result, there are going to be more sort of cyber issues in this space. Okay, so that was the bioeconomy. Let's get into what is cyber biosecurity. So what is it? It's essentially a made-up name. It's existed now for maybe 5-6 years. Some people will call it cyber biosecurity with a hyphen. Some people will call it bio cybersecurity. And in fact, in that book I showed you, we actually had one paper arguing that it should be called cyber biosecurity, another paper arguing that it should be called bio cybersecurity. So it's a field that even doesn't have a defined name, but nevertheless, it is a field. So why does it exist? What are the concerns at the, well, it should be cyber security and the bioeconomy. What are the concerns? There's a whole host of concerns, but I think succinctly, there are concerns of misuse, both of the data. So Professor Ernesto, who spoke before me, spoke a lot about hospital data and issues with that. So there's a lot of concern. Hospitals, by the way, Bruce Schneier, right, famously said, I don't think he was the first person to say it, but he famously said, institutions, given the opportunity to either take, increased cybersecurity or the dancing pig, will pick the dancing pig every time. And more often than not, institutions like hospitals tend to pick the dancing pig or nothing, because hospitals are large institutions. They're very typically very poorly protected from cyber threats. They're also a huge target because their data is very valuable, and the hospitals tend not to be able to operate without the data. And so they're a huge sort of target for ransomware, more so than many other sort of institutions. So there's a lot of concern for the misuse of this sort of data. Wow. Okay. Right. More so than just misuse, right? There's actual malicious destruction of the data. Again, looking at a hospital institution, if someone comes in and destroys the data, you can imagine the implications of that. And of course, also networks and things like that. And finally, exploitation of valuable information. Again, going back to the hospital sort of example, that data is exceedingly valuable and very easily exploitable because of the particularly personal and private nature of that information. So what does cybersecurity do? Well, it doesn't do anything. It's a relatively new field. What does cybersecurity aim to do? And that is at least three things. Assessing the vulnerabilities of an institution or a field or a particular network or a particular laboratory or a particular industry or a particular company within that industry. Assessing the vulnerabilities. How are we doing for time? Developing counter strategies. So not only assessing what's wrong, but developing counter strategies. And again, these are not necessarily large institutions. Oftentimes, these are small labs and small universities that nevertheless have particularly very valuable information. And so you need counter strategies that are designed particularly for this sort of group of people, biologists, biotechnologists in particular, and of course, promoting good policies that will allow us to, in the future, prevent sort of these concerns. So, right, so in terms of assessing the vulnerabilities, so developing an understanding of these vulnerabilities to malicious and harmful activities, there's that word again, which can occur within any of the interfaces that intersect between life sciences and the cybersecurity aspects and the supply chain aspects and the infrastructure systems. It's a whole big trillion-dollar sort of area. So what are some of the malicious and harmful activities? So I see that this formatted a little differently. So one of the concerns is, the thing that I did, which was preventing unauthorized access and data breaches. So not only in hospitals, but also in biolabs and also in industry and stuff like that. So assessing, how are people going to break into these institutions? And of course, if you think about it, anyone here ever been in a biology lab? Any biologists here? Okay. So, you've got undergrads and grads and everyone coming back and forth, and they're a total mess, and their cybersecurity is really nothing. And yet they're playing with very valuable information oftentimes. And so there has to be an assessment to discuss, who is creating the holes, where and when, and how to deal with that. In addition to that, there's concerns, particularly, again, in the hospital industry, malware and ransomware attacks and deciding where they're coming from and assessing what to do. Synthetic biology. So those who don't know, synthetic biology is essentially the mashing together of engineering and biology. This is a field that's been around for 20 years, if not more. It used to be called something else way back when. We called it part systems in like 1998. But anyways, this is a concern where you can actually create with biology perhaps malicious sort of viruses. We're not going to get into COVID, but there is a possibility of creating malicious sort of living organisms through editing and synthetic biology. Other concerns are the supply chain. So thinking about, particularly in the area of biotechnology and in laboratories, you know, there's a lot of, you buy stuff from one company and it gets shipped through the mail, and it's all sort of informal and via emails and, you know, through the guy at the counter downstairs in the basement. It's, the supply chain leaves much to be desired. Bioinformatics and computational risk. So bioinformatics is another interesting biotech name. It's a field, again, you know, started late 90s at the dawn of sort of this big data world. And again, you have a lot of groups in this area developing lots of different apps and lots of different pieces of software. And these get just placed on servers and everyone sort of accesses them and uses them. But of course, a lot of these sort of software can be used for malicious intent. There isn't a lot of sort of assessing whether or not the software is safe, whether or not I should be uploading it to my computer. I may be an undergrad who found, you know, has been told by their PI, you got to do something, and, you know, looks online, downloads a piece of software that happens to be malicious. Dual use research. By definition, this is scary and problematic. And of course, biohacking, so making green bunnies. Green bunnies are the benign sort of instance of doing it, but of course, you can do it in many more sort of malicious ways. Okay, and finally, what's known as the medical device Internet of Things, so not just the regular Internet of Things, but the medical device Internet of Things, which includes both your smartwatch, but also includes sort of insulin pumps and the like, and all those sorts of things all create sort of cyber areas for cybersecurity concerns, and because a lot of this is consumer-based, there isn't a lot of cybersecurity protection, and again, because of the dancing pigs that I spoke of earlier. Wow, we're really running out of time. Implementing measures. So what does that mean in terms of measures? So it means both regulatory and policy institutions and creating international collaborations. Biology and academia in general is sort of an international sort of event, and so you need international collaboration, cooperation to develop standards and things like that. Public awareness and education. Just telling the people in the labs that, you know, they could be there could be cybersecurity threats is another sort of concern and something that can be done. Developing sort of regulatory and standardization. I sort of said training, education. I kind of said, and I can't read what I wrote there because formatting. So what do we have to do? What do we have to do to deal with these concerns of cyber biosecurity? Well, thinking about promoting interoperability between systems, promoting interconnectivity between systems, thinking about the ethical considerations both in clinical trials and in basic science research, and making sure that data is protected, particularly private information in these instances. Updating legacy systems. You know, you shouldn't be operating some Pentium i586 or something in your lab, even if it's running some old piece of lab hardware. Making sure that your legacy systems are updated and interoperable and protected. Developing sort of response and recovery systems, you know, particularly in academia, you know, this doesn't exist. What happens when I get hacked? What happens when my data gets stolen? What happens when someone now has a giant data set that I have of names and genetic information and addresses and all this sort of thing now has been taken over by a hacker? And of course, that goes to, you know, definitely, you know, considering developing sort of privacy and data protection, both in academia and in industry, from biotech to farm and everywhere in between. And of course, developing public perception and trust. Academics and academic labs rely on the trust of you to gain your private information. And if we don't have your trust, then we don't have the information. We don't have the information, we can't do our science. I really have no more time. How much time do I have? 1 minute. I wanted to talk about cybersecurity. I'll just say then that I had a great paper I published with some people down in Beersheba. If you want to know more about really interesting aspects of it, read that paper. It's over there. I'll skip ahead as well. I have another great paper where we talked about a sort of niche industry within this this name that doesn't really exist yet, but sort of cyber neurosecurity, which is a narrow sort of focus on the neuro aspects in the bioeconomy. Again, it's a great paper I published with a doctoral student of mine. We won't go through all that. We will just say that, to summarize, right? There's a growing bioeconomy. We have $1 trillion in the U.S. In terms of whatever the bioeconomy is, $30 trillion worldwide very soon. There are concerns: hacking, data privacy, malicious activities, even white hat hacking, all this sort of stuff. And to deal with it, cybersecurity is focused on discovering the vulnerabilities, developing defenses for those vulnerabilities, and designing policies both in government and in the lab to deal with those vulnerabilities. So I want to thank everyone very much for your time. I ran out of time, but thank you.
Thank you, Dov. This is really announcing a new domain which contains all the aspects of technology and policies and other things, and really exciting. Great. And you know, we spoke this week a lot about the challenges of cybersecurity. We had panels of CISOs that shared with us their concerns and what they think are the highest priorities, but not too much research and discussion is about what the CEOs think. So about this, we are going to hear Dr. Manuel Hepfer, who is a research affiliate at Oxford University at Said Business School, and the head of knowledge and insight at Istari Global. And it's my pleasure. We even work together in one of the companies. So great. Please, Manuel.
Right, thank you. Does that microphone work as well? It does, yeah. So I can move around a little bit. Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to shift gears slightly and talk about managerial aspects of cybersecurity. I want to talk about the research that we just published, which we titled the CEO Report on Cyber Resilience. But before we start, I wanted to tell you the story of how that research came to life. Now, a couple of years ago, I was a PhD researcher at Oxford University, and I was interested in the resilience of companies who are faced or are suffering from a serious cyber attack. And at the time, I was comparing how 3 global companies had responded differently to the same cyber attack. Now, the cyber attack at the time was called NotPetya. It is still considered, as many of you know, one of the most devastating cyber attacks in history. And in each of these 3 companies, I got really deep access. So I got access to documents, presentations, videos, audio files of the cyber attack before, during, and after. But I also got access to the people in these companies. So I was able to interview the IT engineers who were down in the trenches 24 hours, 7 days a week, recovering systems. But I was also able to interview the CISOs, the CIOs, and the 3 CEOs of each company. And all of these interviews that I did were insightful, but somehow the interviews with the chief executive officers stood out. And I still remember sitting in the executive office of one of the CEOs, and he took 1.5 hours to walk me through his cyber attack, or his experience of the cyber attack. And I still remember that he said 2 things to me. The first thing he said was, before the cyber attack, it was completely impossible to think that anything can put us out of business. And the second thing that he said to me was, well, this was the worst experience in my career because for the first time, I didn't have an intuition of what to do. And that's kind of resonated with me and stayed in my mind for a couple of months. And fast forward, I finished my PhD. I joined a company called Istari. Everybody knows Oxford University, so I don't have to explain that. But Istari was set up by the state-owned investment company Temasek. It's state-owned from Singapore. And Istari does 3 things. One, it's an investment company. So we have $2 billion of investment allocated to investing in cybersecurity companies. The second thing that we do is advisory and consulting. And the third thing that we do is education, executive education and research. So when I joined, and that's another story of how I ended up joining, when I joined, the CEO of the company, Rashmi, she asked me, well, Manuel, we love the research that you were doing at Oxford, can you do something similar at Istari for us? And I was remembering the conversation that I had with the CEO in that executive suite, and I thought, well, there's been a lot of talk in the cybersecurity industry for years that cybersecurity needs to be led from the top, that it's a CEO issue. But actually, I was surprised that nobody's ever gone out and asked CEOs in a systematic way how they manage cybersecurity risk. So we did that. And our guiding questions, you know, when we think about research in academia, we always like to have research questions. The first guiding question was, how do CEOs manage cybersecurity risk? It's a pretty simple question, actually. Now, two sub-questions we had was, what's the difference between those CEOs who had suffered an attack and those that had not yet endured a serious cyber attack? And the third question was, are the current cybersecurity frameworks like ISO and NIST and whatever, are they adequate for CEOs? So we went out, and what we did was we interviewed 37 chief executive officers from around the world. It wasn't a survey, so we actually sat down with them, we asked them for an hour of their time, and we had a couple of questions prepared for them. Now, you can see the sample here, but importantly, 9 of those CEOs had experience leading their company through a serious cyber attack. And that's important because we wanted to compare those lessons and mistakes and regrets from the CEOs who'd been through an attack with those views of CEOs that had not yet been through an attack. We found 3 things. The overarching thing that we found is actually in the title of the report. The report is called the CEO Report on Cyber Resilience. It's not called the CEO Report on Cybersecurity, and that's important, right? So the overarching thing that we found was CEOs want to move beyond simply hardening their cybersecurity defenses to building organizational resilience to cyber attacks. And I'm going to go into detail into that in a minute. Now, the second thing we found was that there seemed to be some mindset shifts that are required in CEOs to achieve that. But even that's not enough. The third thing that we found was that they need to change their playbooks, how they act. So I'm going to go into each of these 3 areas very briefly. So the first thing is about moving from cybersecurity to cyber resilience. Now, what does that mean? Cybersecurity is often perceived to be a departmental issue. You can delegate responsibility, understanding to the technical guys, whereas resilience speaks more the business language. It's perceived to be an organizational endeavor. Cybersecurity is often, not always, perceived to be about prevention and protection, whereas resilience speaks more to the language of preparedness and adaptation. Cybersecurity focuses a lot on risk, resilience a lot on, on threat, resilience a lot on risk. Cybersecurity oftentimes is perceived to be a point-in-time issue, whereas resilience is continuous, and cybersecurity often is about individuals, individual companies protecting themselves, whereas cyber resilience speaks to the idea of collective. Now, what I want to share before I go into those 4 mindsets is why resilience resonates with the CEOs. Now, interestingly, when I started these 37 interviews, I started the first 2 or 3 by asking the CEO specific questions about cybersecurity. And I could really see the level of discomfort on the other end of the line. And the reaction that I got from the CEO was, oh, I've got a great CISO. Do you want me to pull him or her into this conversation? I said, no, I actually just want to pick your brain on something. So I changed my focus slightly in the next interviews that I had. And I asked the CEO a question about resilience. And I asked them how they've been able to cope with the pandemic, how their company had been able to go through and be resilient in the face of general business crises. That completely removed the tension from the room. And from then on, I moved to cybersecurity and cyber resilience. Now, interestingly, when you looked at the slide earlier, it said 1 hour plus conversations. All of the conversations I had were scheduled to be 1 hour, but most of them actually took longer than that because the CEOs wanted to stay on longer to continue the conversation because they said it's quite an enjoyable one. They were quite afraid going into the chat saying, oh, there's this PhD, from Oxford wanting to poke me about cybersecurity, and I have no clue about that. But when we spoke about resilience and how they build resilience in their business, that completely changed the game. Now, how do CEOs build cyber resilience, organizational resilience to cyber attack? The first thing they need to do is they need to change their mindsets. And we discover 4 mindset changes that are required for CEOs to build cyber resilience. And the first one is about responsibility and accountability. So we asked all of the CEOs in the study if they felt accountable for cybersecurity. And all of them, without exception, insisted that they did. Now, interestingly, as I said before, Istari runs executive education courses with CISOs, together with Cambridge University, not Oxford, unfortunately. And we asked the CISOs who participate in that executive education course if they believed that their CEO feels accountable. And the majority of them said no. So there seems to be a gap between the CEO's perception and the CISO's perception. And the solution to this, we found, was in the notion or the difference between accountability and responsibility. So one of the CEOs who'd suffered an attack, and I have the quote down here, said, "It's not enough to feel accountable." Because accountability is oftentimes associated with being the face of the mistake after something bad happens. He says he needs to become co-responsible with his CISO. And that's an important mindset shift, because responsibility means proactive and ongoing engagement before something bad happens. So the first mindset shift is, as CEO, don't be accountable, be co-responsible. The second that we found was embrace the preparedness paradox. We also asked all of the CEOs in our study to rate intuitively their preparedness, the organization's preparedness to deal with a serious cyber attack. Now, bear in mind, we didn't ask for protection. We asked if they felt that their company is well prepared. And you can see the results up here. With the exception of one, most of them rated their preparedness relatively high. Now, interestingly, those 9 CEOs who'd suffered an attack said that they had also previously believed that their organization was well prepared, before then realizing their mistake in hindsight. And it was one of the biggest regrets that they had, that they thought their organization was well prepared. So what we coined the preparedness paradox is an inverse relationship between the perception of preparedness and resilience. The more prepared people believe to be for a cyber attack, the more complacent they become, and ultimately that might lower the resilience of the company. So the way to deal with that is, we call it embrace the preparedness paradox, but to see preparedness not as an achievable end state, but rather as a set of ongoing processes that continually challenge the organization and keep it on its feet. So don't ever feel prepared, in other words. So the second mindset is embrace the preparedness paradox. The third mindset is move away from blind trust to informed trust. And if you ever speak with any of the CEOs, trust is an important issue for them, right? Because they all have to trust their teams, and it doesn't matter if it's the marketing team or the finance team or any other team in the business. Just by the nature of their job, they have to trust their teams. But cyber is different, right? Because of the seemingly technological nature of it, CEOs tend to put blind trust into their cybersecurity teams and their CISOs, right? So blind trust goes back to the idea of delegating responsibility and understanding to them and just trusting them that everything's going according to plan. They were treating the absence of a serious cyber attack as an indication that their company was on good track. That is not always the case. So instead of blindly trusting their advisors and their security teams, the CEOs who'd suffered an attack said they want to move away from that blind trust to something that they call informed trust. They still need to trust their cyber team, as they do with any other parts of the business, but they need to have enough knowledge and information to be able to challenge the cybersecurity teams and their CISOs, to question them, right? Rather than just assuming everything's in hands. I always included some of the quotes in here in case you're interested. The fourth mindset is about stakeholder pressure. And you speak with these CEOs who had suffered an attack, and I was surprised by the candor and the honesty by which they spoke to us. And they said, this was the worst experience of my time. And I remember one of them, after the interview, telling me that he's only shared some of the things he told me with his wife, because they were so personal. And he said during the attack, it felt like somebody was continually ripping out his guts, because he didn't know what to do. The company was on the brink of extinction, and he didn't want to be the CEO who was in the seat when the company became insolvent or bankrupt. Now, in that instance, in that case of a serious cyber attack, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the CEO, from regulators, from stakeholders, from shareholders, from the board, even from internal employees. And the serious a cyber attack that is serious puts the CEO in the public spotlight. Now, interestingly, we asked the CEOs if they felt comfortable making decisions on cybersecurity. And you can see the results here. 72% said no. This is actually the most cited statistic from the research. I don't know why, but now this is interesting because in the absence of a cyber attack, they get away with not feeling comfortable making decisions on cyber. But when a cyber attack hits, they have to make decisions, even though they're uncomfortable. So one way to deal with that stakeholder pressure is what we call adopt different communication styles. There's 4 different communication styles that CEOs can adopt to manage that stakeholder pressure. The first is what we call a transmitter. So if there's external stakeholders putting pressure on the CEO, they just transmit it through the organization. Think about it as forward email, right? I'm getting an email from the regulator, I'm forwarding it to the cybersecurity team. The second thing is an amplifier. Now, amplifier means that the CEO amplifies the pressure. Now, that might feel a bit counterintuitive, but in the absence of a cyber attack, sometimes that's required, right? To keep the organization on its feet. The third is the filter. So you filter some of the pressure, other pressure you let through. And the fourth one is the absorber. So the CEO absorbs all of the pressure and doesn't pass it on to the cybersecurity teams. So the four mindsets are: be accountable. Don't just be accountable, be co-responsible. Embrace the preparedness paradox. Move from blind trust to informed trust, and adopt 4 different communication styles to regulate stakeholder pressure. Now I'm going to close this with, I'm not going to go into the playbook. To read that, you'll have to look at the report. But I'm going to close with 3 pieces of advice that we presented to CEOs and chairs during events that we run together with Temasek, the state-owned wealth fund from Singapore. And we presented these to about 30 CEOs and chairs in Singapore in February. We presented those to about 20 CEOs and chairs in Europe last year in November. And we said there's 3 things that they can do. The first is, don't just rely on your technology team. It's okay to trust them, but in the world of cybersecurity speak, trust but verify. The second is, set up a quarterly cyber resilience forum. The purpose of that isn't to hold anybody to account. It's not part of the formal governance processes, but it's there to engage learning and information exchange. Invite people from the board, from the management team, from the cyber team. And the third piece of advice that we presented was invite somebody with cyber tech experience. There's something very powerful looking somebody in the eye when he or she tells the story of how a cyber attack hit. Now, unfortunately, the world of cybersecurity is one where we don't tend to hear these stories a lot. And that's a shame. That's a big miss, because there's a lot of insights and learnings and mistakes, frankly, in how organizations deal with these attacks. So I'm going to close here. I know I'm running out of time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. If you want to take a look at the report, there's a QR code here. It's a cybersecurity conference, so if you're uncomfortable with QR codes, you can download it. You can download the report here. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to, catching up. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Also here in Tel Aviv University, we see the shift of the importance of talking not only with the CISOs and the more educational programs are these days it's been developed towards the CEO level and the executive level, even of board of directors and others. So this is really so important. We are moving to our next speaker and look how our journey here this morning moves from the technical to more policy aspects and back to the technical. And this is the nice part of being interdisciplinary. So in this journey this morning, I'm sure that you will get pieces of all the type of our disciplinary domain. So the next speaker is actually our collaborator, the one who leads one of the tracks of our collaboration with the National University of Singapore, and this is my pleasure to invite to the stage the one who leads an important center in the university that we met so many of his students, graduates, and others. So it's my pleasure to invite my friend Professor Jin Song Dong from the National University of Singapore. He is the deputy head of the Computer Science Department and has many other roles that I will skip them here. So please.
Firstly, it's my great pleasure. First time to Israel, really love it. And thank you so much for the invitation. Today I'm going to talk about basically 3 topics. And the first is about automatic reasoning verification system we developed in Singapore and US. The second, I just want to touch the little bit overview of a joint project with ATU, with our colleague and friend, looking at developing this AI-based anti-phishing platform. The third topic, because the topic many friends suggest me to touch on trusted AI, which is quite relevant. The third topic is about integrating automatic reasoning techniques with machine learning so that we can provide explainability and verifiability. So the first and the third topic actually been commercialized systems, not just academic prototype. We're also hoping the second project, a joint project with the Israel partners, to be able to push into a commercial product in the future. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my 2 previous collaborators, which have very influential impact to my group. First guy, I think some of you may know Tony Hong. He won the Turing Award. Turing Award, for the industry people probably don't know, is the Nobel Prize in Computing. Ho won the Turing Award for Ho logic, but his another very big influential work is on communicating sequential process, which is event-based calculus, can provide very precise concurrency and communication semantics. Our language is based on Tony Ho's CSP, called Communicating Sequential Processes. However, our verification engine is based on another good friend and collaborator, Edmund Clark. He formerly was a professor at the CMU. Clark also won the Turing Award in 2007 with his PhD student, Alan Emerson. Clark also won the Franklin Bowers Award. The reason he won the Franklin Bowers Award is because the successful of model checking algorithms has been heavily applied in industry. I think my laptop, most of your laptop you're using, the i7 core execution cluster is completely model checked by the in-house model checking systems in Intel. Even Microsoft, Bill Gates talk about, they were part of Microsoft research come up a product can verify the driver software correctness based on model checking techniques. So that's what the reason behind those awards. In Singapore, we're very lucky. We have those 2 researchers visiting my group multiple times, just like Yoda and Yanni visited my group multiple times now. So we're happy, very fortunate to have those great researchers visiting us, give us advice, give us feedback, to be a project collaborator to helping us along the way. So I really want to also acknowledge them to start with. But the system we built is very different from Intel and Microsoft, because the Intel system can only be used for Intel process i7 core execution cluster. The model checking developed by Intel cannot be used by you guys. And the Microsoft driver correctness is also very domain-specific model checking system, only can use by Microsoft. What we wanted is build a very generic verification engine catering for many different application domains. The basic model is based on Tony Ho's concurrency module called CSP Sharp. It's based on CSP but extended with the C# programming languages, so we can reasoning about concurrent systems and the real-time system and the probabilistic systems. We also built a security module, particularly verify security protocols. The system has been commercialized, but they also have an academic version that can be freely downloaded by academic institutions. The commercial one has been selling very well in Japan, so we go to Japan every year to give an industry tutorial on how to use this verification engine. I saw some of the Japanese company from NTT, our customer was here in this conference, so very glad to see that. Currently, the PAT model checking is very heavily applied in Singapore-based industry, also related cybersecurity project. The first project is with Oxford University, looking to verify, analyzing smart grid security and privacy. The second one is building a compositional approach. If you can verify the component system is secure, then we can try to come up with a compositional approach to verify much more complicated system is also secure. The Singtel NUS Cybersecurity Lab also using PAT analyzing the traffic data anomaly detections. Similar project has also been applied by the Cisco project with collaborators Ling Yun moving from Singapore back to Shanghai Jiaotong University, but we're still very closely collaborating on those projects. And the last project is the one we're collaborating with ATU, with Israel partner, to come up with this AI-based anti-phishing platform. So I'm going to talk about very quickly about each project, but I also want to touch the issue of trusted AI. So how the formal verification techniques be able to help to certify AI. You know, in security system, we have this common criteria. You have 7 levels of qualities. You know, the highest level of security systems, you need to be formally modeled, formally verified. Should we have similar requirements for certified AI systems? So that kind of question. And also, autonomous system has been heavily used by not just civilian systems, but also military. Ukraine war shows that the future of the war will be more likely between drones, autonomous systems. Can we have a trusted decision engine to help us to check and balance and regulating those systems? Yeah, another very interesting sports analytics is also touching on how to integrating AI, machine learning, computer vision with the formal verification, making accurate and trusted decisions. So those are quite a project which I will quickly touch through. The basically using model checking or system to specify, verify systems is really looking at build the CSP Sharp model, and even use the other languages. You can also translate it into C#, these programming languages. And then you can looking at formalizing the attacking model and the desirable security properties in linear temporal logic and the CSP Sharp notation. And finally, using the verification engine to reasoning about it. To make a user to easily use the system, we automatically translate the message sequence charts as input into the reasoning engine, and also to perform verification using Python libraries already encode cryptography primitives attack reasoning engines, so that the full model can be reasoned within the Python framework. The number of applications we're looking into, like a trusted computing platform, smart grid privacy and security, and web authentication systems, even the smart home privacy and security issues. The collaboration with Oxford is really looking at smart grid security and privacy, particularly to come up a formal foundation and a framework for trusted computing system like TPM, trusted platform module. So basically, we're using PAT to analyzing the system, particularly using TPM. We find actually there are a number of implicit assumptions and 2 severe logical flaws in the system using TPM. PAT also been used to reasoning about smart contract and the Web3, the blockchain systems, particular reasoning about smart contract security privacy. And the number of property has been verified using PAT. Another project is looking into identify the web identification systems. The basic approach is try to do the protocol extraction automatically and then verify the system properties and the security property using PAT engine. And now I'm going to go to the second topic and quickly give a little bit of overview of this AI-based anti-phishing project, joint work with our collaborators from TAU. Basically, we have two different kind of layers in approach. We have this passive layer which focus on AI-based web page analysis and also the network-based analysis. For the active defense layer, we're looking at the target analysis and traffic analysis and also some phishing kit analysis. Our team divided into different groups but interconnected by reproducing a list of phishing website and also our partner also looking at a new website and feedback to our system whenever they feel there's suspicious activity. And the basic approach is using computer vision and deep learning, try to identify the company logo, what we call brand intention, and also identify the potential taking intention automatically using deep learning and computer vision. And then we're analyzing that and checking the list. However, sometimes if we don't have a new company logo come up and we're not in our reference list, we're going to do the online reference going on the fly to check those properties. So phishing, if you look at phishing, is really like a misinformation, but with a malicious intention. And right now, I think people also worry about large language model like ChatGPT generate a lot of fake information, and particularly with a malicious kind of intention to trick the system, to confuse people, and so on. It is definitely a really major threat. We even argue that even with a good intention, you try to use the ChatGPT in the good intention, and the output, the decision making, you had to be really check and analyze because they're not trustworthy. And perhaps the formal reasoning techniques can apply to that. To make that point clear, I just want to make a maybe lighter example and to show what is the problem with the current ChatGPT, right, or the AI systems. A few years ago, we were given a task at the type level of sports analytics, looking at a case and how to basically helping our Australian coach, which was a Federer's coach at that time, to give a precise analysis in terms of strategy, looking at how Federer to have a competitive advantage over Nadal. So that task was quite challenging because many top-level coach looking at the data, that's the task we given was before 2017. And look at the data, Federer has 17 Grand Slam, Nadal 14. Federer has been world number one for 300 weeks, Nadal only half. Federer have a 6 ATP final results, Nadal still 0. But at that time, people think whatever the AI techniques, machine learning or data mining techniques, using neural networks, using SMV or random forest, it's all show up Federer is supposed to be the winner by a certain margin. But that contradicts to another key indication is whenever Federer meet Nadal, Federer lose in a big way, only winning 30% of their head-to-head counts. So can AI help, right? And what's the problem? Even at that time, people tried using various data mining techniques and try to analyze and provide advice and to how to help Federer, say, to beat Nadal. Of course, nowadays, people should ask ChatGPT, right? So we did this research and produce output and a few years ago. So now we come back to the history. We ask GDP right now. So these few days results, what I asked ChatGPT for, latest version. So how do Federer beat Nadal, right? So this is the ChatGPT output. Let's look at the first point. First point is that the key strategy for Federer is to use powerful, accurate serve to control the pace of the match. And if you can serve fast, accurate, basically have a good chance. Totally useless. Anyone serving fast and inside accurate will beat everybody, right? It's just not possible. Second one, become more technical, more kind of a smart decision domain particular for Federer. So second point is talk about another strategy used for Federer is to using volley, means to come to the net, because Federer very good at net, right? Winning 9-time Wimbledon must be good. So, but against average player, absolutely no problem. Against Nadal, totally is a disaster. Because the reason is Nadal has this such a heavy topspin. If you stay back, he can hit a high topspin. If you come to net, he put a very low topspin right to your feet. You have to volley up, then Nadal kill you the next. That's why Federer always stay back. He never go for the net, because that was the wrong strategy for ChatGPT. Advise Federer to go forward. The third one, if you look at ChatGPT, say that, wow, Federer, have a good slice, maybe try to mix it up. Use backhand slice, so basically to change the pace against Nadal, right? Which is completely wrong. The reason is, the Federer, if you slice the ball, and the ball will spin like this, and Nadal love topspin, and the ball even faster coming back. Federer already have a problem with Nadal heavy topspin in French Open, to handle that high bounce ball. So the third advice from ChatGPT completely wrong. What about the last one? Last one basically says Federer would have to play his best tennis, mentally had to be strong against Nadal. Totally useless, right? It doesn't, if a coach say that, Federer says, of course, right? Of course I had to do that. And it doesn't make sense. So, the question is, you could ask, okay, ChatGPT couldn't do it. What you can do about it? But can you use your formal reasoning technique to help Federer beat Nadal? Yes, actually that's exactly what we did. And he's also shown the formal reasoning techniques can combine with machine learning, be able to help players in a very effective way. So what we did is using probabilistic reasoning engine in the formal verification combined with machine learning to looking into the model. And the result, what we basically suggest Federer is that whenever Nadal attack you to your backhand, your usual backhand cross-court was way too much. So what you need to do is put a more 2% backhand down the line. So that advice basically helping Federer winning all the matches against Nadal. From 2017, he beat Nadal every single time with that very tiny little touch of change. Just show a little bit more, we're also helping Australian player as a contract-based, consultancy to helping top players to beat Federer, right? To help a low-ranked player to beat a high-ranked player like Federer. The reason because this player, John Millman, helping my son. My son was #1 junior player in Australia. They practiced together. The reason we're helping John to beat Federer first time in his life using the same strategy. Then what? Then Djokovic heard about it. Tried to call me, through my son's coach. So we said, sure, we can talk about it, use the same strategy, and even show Djokovic the weakness involving, this is my son practiced with Djokovic in 2020. We give a specific tactic for Djokovic because the next day Djokovic play Federer. So it's the same kind of thing. So if my son, if Djokovic slice, son do topspin, Djokovic also have a certain weakness. He need to be careful. His forehand handling the deep shots is a mistake, the last shots. Next day, Djokovic beat Federer 3-0, so Federer had no chance. The idea is that can we, using formal reasoning techniques, be able to helping decision-making, particularly combined with AI. So the latest work, I'm just one couple slides, is looking at a combined machine learning with automatic reasoning so that we can provide explanation why you should do more backhand down the line rather than cross-court. And also to do the verification about the government regulation. So that's pretty much, yeah, the last slide, just go back to the phishing website to show you the performance of those integrated techniques. It doesn't really slow down. It's still pretty accurate, pretty fast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and so many topics covered in one lecture, and this is really, you gave an intro to our joint research. So stay tuned. I hope that next year we'll be able to share more about this research. And our next speaker is the leader of the second track of our collaboration with Singapore, and specifically with SMU, with the Singapore Management University. And this is my pleasure to introduce Professor David Law, who is Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Information and System Cluster School of Computing and Information Systems at Singapore Management University. So please, David, he is already second timer in collaboration with Tel Aviv University, so pleasure to have you here. Please.
So thank you very much, Yaniv. It's really my pleasure to be here in Tel Aviv the second time. So it's been great to visit since 2017 was my first time. So it had been 6 years. Great to come back again and to share a little bit about the research done in Singapore Management University. So I had a chance to work for the last 17 years actually with one of the faculty members at Tel Aviv University. And hopefully this is a continuation and we can continue to work forward maybe more than 2 decades. And so I'd like to share a little bit about work done in our School of Computing and Information Systems in Singapore Management University, especially on this topic of software supply chain. How can we let AI and also humans to work together? So AI has a lot of capability. Of course, humans has also a lot of capabilities. How can we join force in order to solve some of the most difficult problems, including software supply chain security? So a little bit of introduction. I think everybody knows today that software are not typically built from scratch. So we make use of a lot of third-party libraries. And those third-party libraries also make use of additional third-party libraries and so on, right? So there's this big software supply chain. And if one of them has a vulnerability, right, in this big supply chain, then they can create a lot of havoc to the entire infrastructure. And what happened is that it went up to the news, for example, this Log4j, but that's not the only one. There are many other issues with this software supply chain. So a couple of years ago, we did a study with Veracode. So Veracode One is the leading application security company. And basically, we want to see to what extent this vulnerabilities in software supply chain affects repositories that many people like to download and use and fork from GitHub, right? And we find that actually most projects have these vulnerable dependencies. And also many of these dependencies that open source project use are rather outdated. And fixing them takes a long time, maybe 3 months and 5 months. So during this period, there is like an open window where attacker can leverage that vulnerability to create a lot of damage. And there have been a number of studies in software engineering literature. One of them is called the Linus Law. So basically, if we have a lot of eyeballs, it makes the bugs seem shallow. So we want to see, does it really apply for vulnerable dependencies or not? And actually, we find that it does not apply. We see many projects with a lot of developers in them. They still have a lot of vulnerable dependencies. How about the experience of the developers themselves? So we also see whether developer experience is positively or negatively correlated with vulnerable dependencies. We also see that there is no correlation whatsoever. So basically there is like a lot of problems because even someone who are very experienced, they also introduce a lot of vulnerable dependencies. And we hypothesize the reason is this, right? So we have, developer have their own code. Developer also have code that they make use. So arguably, it's easier to look at vulnerabilities and find those in our own code than code that we never write. Somebody else is right? And worse still, it could be vulnerabilities happening here. in the transitive dependencies, very hard to identify. So since this joint effort we have with them, we have been working together on a number of projects that I'm very happy to share, like on improving this process that the industry used called the software composition analysis. So what happened is that we have the developer writing a project, and then they have this SES scanner. So it's like a magic black box, right? They try to analyze their project and then highlight if they make use of some third-party library, a version of it that contains a specific kind of vulnerability. Of course, there is no magic here. What happened is that there is this human, right? The security researchers, right? They need to go through all the information available in National Vulnerability Database, in commits, in bug reports that are related to the vulnerabilities. And this person must painstakingly add those information to this SCA vulnerable library database. So there is no magic here. There is need for a human sitting there. But what is the problem? The problem is that there is just a ton of information in various sources. We ask the human to do all this thing manually? Can, but we need to have a lot of manpower. And humans also may be very bored to analyze all this information. So these are the two problems that we found by talking with them. So one of the problems that we highlight is that this NVD is incomplete. So NVD, National Vulnerability Database, they have a list of vulnerabilities, but that's not all of them. So many vulnerabilities are not reported in this NVD database. They are in the commits, they are in bug reports, they are spread all over the place. So how do we find them? And the second challenge is that the NVD entries often are very long, very detailed, a lot of information there. So how do we find exactly which of the version of the library that contain a specific kind of vulnerabilities? So a lot of manual analysis is needed. So can we help these security researchers with the power of AI, software engineering, and cybersecurity? And the answer is yes. And let me highlight a few examples. So one of them is to address the first challenge. NVD is not complete. Can we find vulnerability-related information in various sources? And this leads to this work that has been deployed and maintained for a number of years together with Veracode. So basically, it's a machine learning approach to curate vulnerability. It also was presented in the research conference and fortunately won an award. So what happened is this: we want to help the security researchers to be able to scan a large amount of bug reports, a large amount of commits, a large amounts of emails in possibly like millions of mailing lists and repositories. And we cannot expect this human to do everything by himself or herself, but rather we want to use the power of software engineering, cybersecurity, and AI to augment the capability of the human, right, so that it can analyze a lot more data. So we built a system that I just referred to here as Vul Curator, vulnerability curation. And I'm just going to highlight like what are the considerations that we have when we are building the systems. So the first one is here. The data is highly imbalanced. So most data items, most emails in the, for example, in the mailing list is not related to vulnerability. The second thing is that there is a lot of unlabeled data. Like a lot of data, just a few of the data can be labeled by human as vulnerability related or not. Most of them are unlabeled. So how can we make use of that unlabeled information? And the third consideration is that we want to build a system that not just work on the testing data, but the system needs to work across time, right? So the system needs to get updated. When new data comes in, when new labels comes in, how can we update the system so that the system can remain effective in the long run? And the next thing is also related to the trustworthiness concept that Prof. Zong has mentioned. Like, how can we really trust the system, right? What exactly is the measure of trustworthiness? Is it accuracy or is it something else, right? I like to highlight a bit the journey with them. So, like, this is the architecture. I won't talk about it in detail, but I just want to highlight that we've make a few decisions, like a conscious design decision to make things work. So to deal with data imbalance, right, we follow a pragmatic solution. So what happened is that we follow a simplest first approach. Can we do a simple approach to solve this problem? If yes, let's do it, right? Why need to have a more complicated approach? So one thing we do is that we first use a set of keywords, and those keywords are associated with vulnerability. So we get a smaller set of data, and then we label that smaller set of data using a security expert's time, and then we get a balanced data that is labeled, and then we can use that balanced data to create a classifier. So this pragmatic approach to deal with data imbalance. And then there is a lot of data that is unlabeled. How can we make use of those unlabeled data? So we follow this self-supervised approach. So one way we want to learn a distributed representation of text. So this is the underlying things that make ChatGPT and other transformer methods work, right? But this was in 2020, so there was no ChatGPT then. And then the second thing is like self-training. So what happened is that, can we first have a bootstrap phase? We try to make predictions with a smaller amount of data. The system produced some predictions with some confidence, and we're gonna use some of those, the one with the high confidence, the one with the low confidence, to augment the training data. So that's what we do. And also the next thing is that, how can we deal when data changes, model changes, how can we deal with that? So we need to periodically retrain the model with the new data. But the next question is that, how do we know the new model is better than the old model? And one thing is that we want to have a hidden test set, a benchmark set that we hide, and then we can actually run it with the new model. And the next thing is that, what is the measure? What is the metric so that we can measure success, whether the new model deserves to be deployed or not? Right, in the machine learning literature, people often look at various notions of accuracy, but is it sufficient? So we talk to them, and they find that, no, that's not sufficient. We do not want a model that change radically. Big changes, no good for humans, right? So we want the machine learning solution so that it can make prediction that is better, but not radically better than the version that was deployed last month. So we have this metric called stability, and that enables the system to be adopted by engineers in their operations. So the system has been in operation for a number of years, and this is just one snapshot of one of the instances where the systems get updated, right? So this line, for example, the blue line has two different curves. This is the persistent and recall curve, and you can see that there is an improvement in its ability to detect whether a commit is related to a vulnerability. And if we see this improvement and the system is stable, then it can get deployed, right? So we compute this at the end of every cycle. So that's the deal with the first challenge, right? How we can help humans to scan and find more vulnerability-related data that is not in the National Vulnerability Database. The second challenge is that we want to help humans to read a lot of text in the NVD entry and find relevant pieces of information, which is the library that has a specific kind of vulnerability. So this is another joint paper together with them. And what happened is that we want to enable the security researchers to read a lot of information in the NVD entries to populate this vulnerability database. Basically identify those library names and the versions from the link pages from this National Vulnerability Database entries. And what we do is that, this is the entry in National Vulnerability Database. We analyze this information so that we can get, like, this library is affected by this vulnerability that is reported in this NVD entry. And I won't describe the details available in the paper, but basically we do like data cleaning, feature engineering involving human in the loop, and this process that is referred to as extreme multi-label classification. Why extreme multi-label classification? Because there are just too many labels. Basically, there are a lot of libraries available out there, right? And then a particular NVD entry can be associated with any subset of those millions of libraries available out there. So the problem is actually very hard. And in our first paper, we tried with about 7,600 NVD entries that are labeled. And then we can actually get an F1 score about 0.5. So it's not that high, but of course, the problem is very difficult. And this is just the first work that we'll do with them. The system also get deployed, used by the security analysts. So what have we done after that? This is in 2020, right, the beginning of the pandemic, right? We need to present this online. And then after that, we still work together. And to deal with this challenge, number one, we work with them, but also with other industry partners Like we recently more recently work on ability for it to work if the commit messages are very bad. So remember earlier we want to find commits related to vulnerability. We often rely on the commit messages, which is in natural language. But you know, many developers don't write very good commit messages. Some of them don't write any at all, right? So how can we identify these vulnerability fixes? Just by looking at the semantic of code. So I think we are one of the early work that leverage this large language model trained on code, right, so that it can differentiate between one kind of commit with another kind of commit. So this one to differentiate between vulnerability fixes and those that are not. So another thing that we look is, can we leverage the hierarchical structure of the code changes? And also, can we use not just one large language models, but multiple large language models and other deep learning strategies, compose them together so that they are more powerful? And this is just work that was recently accepted. And another direction is that, can we provide explanation? Because the security expert, yeah, this one is a vulnerability fix. Why? Can you explain it to me, right? So we provide a certain kind of explanation by highlighting to them the kind of vulnerability that is being fixed in the commit, by highlighting to them the corresponding CWE entry. And the next thing that we do is related to the second challenge. So just to remind, basically, we had like this NVD entry, very long, a lot of links. It links to a lot of web pages. How can we read all of that? Let AI read all those link information and predict, right, those libraries that are affected with the vulnerability. So in our previous version, we make use of a traditional machine learning. It was 2020. So this one, we employ deep learning, and we can get a boost of performance. And more recently, we also deal with the zero-shot problem. You know that libraries today, new ones are being released every day, right? How do we deal with the zero-shot phenomenon when a new library comes? So how can we predict whether they are related to a particular vulnerability in a national vulnerability database or not, right? And also we incorporate this time-aware heuristics, and as the result, we can boost the performance by a big margin. So this is also very recent work just presented a few months ago in Australia. So what I think are the future directions of the work? Let me just check how much time do I have. 2 minutes, perfect, yes. So the future directions, I think one thing is that we see there's this growth on large language models, right? And people are like focused maybe on the biggest, the best of it, like ChatGPT, but the bigger it is, the more problems it have. The smaller it is, the less problem it have in some dimension. So the problem is not a unidimensional one, it's not the bigger the better, right? So how can we deal with the problem with this big large language model with the smaller ones? Let them work together and compose them together so that we can get better performance, especially for vulnerability curation. The next problem that I think is very interesting is also providing explainable recommendations. And I think we need an interdisciplinary approach about this. Because often in AI, explanation is like, this feature is very important. But is that information sufficient for human? So we need to do a user study. We need to talk to different humans. Explanation must be different depending on the different humans, depending on their background, depending on their needs. The current solution cannot provide them, even in the vulnerability curation, right? So to do that, we need to talk to humans, understand what they need, understand what AI can do, and meet in between. So I think there is need for interdisciplinary approach for that. So the second thing is like the concept of trust. If we have a SCA that always say that, hey, there is like 10 problems in your system, 100 problems in your system, then the engineers come and look, and that's not actually true. So you will not believe that SCA anymore. You won't believe the static analysis anymore. So we find that there is a lot of false alarm also in many static analysis tools, including SCA, and that can create a problem. So in our recent project, also supported by the Cybersecurity Authority of Singapore, is that we want to see if we can like create a more precise call graph so that the software composition analysis can do better. And another one is that can we actually create exploit? So if there is an exploit, so humans will believe, yes, this is a vulnerability, I need to fix it soon. And this can be an explanation. So how can we do that? So we try to look into the problem. And I'd like to acknowledge, many of this work is supported by Cybersecurity Authority. The project is just ended. We managed to find many new CVEs for TensorFlow, and we're very happy that many tools are being deployed in multiple industry partners, and we also trained many people that went to the industry in Singapore. So we also like to advertise, there is this Center for Research on Intelligent Software Engineering in Singapore. We are something like ICRC as well, in the sense that we also do many things that are interdisciplinary. We talk to the law faculty, we talk to the business faculty, and we try to understand what do people need and then build solutions to address that need, considering the legal aspects and other things as well. And yeah, we are very happy if you come and visit us in Singapore. And we also have a number of collaborations, 2 collaborations with Tel Aviv universities on mobile and privacy and security. I think this afternoon I'm going to present more about it. Not sure if it's the open door or closed door, but we are going to present updates on that. And we also have other bilateral collaboration before. We work with, for example, the UK and also France, India, to work together to address this difficult problem involved in developing softwares that is intelligent and developing it in an intelligent way. So just last slide, basically I'm working on developing a trusted systems so that the developers and AI can work together. So now there is a GitHub Copilot, but can developer really trust that GitHub Copilot? Often it creates a lot of problems. Like Stack Overflow got a lot of vulnerability data. How can we deal with that in a trustworthy way? So this project just started a few days ago for the next 5 years, and we're looking for collaborators to work together. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and invitation to come here and talk about this. And if you have any question, we can certainly discuss over coffee or things like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. And I like the comment, you know, within all the ideas that you shared, that sometimes to being the large, to be a ChatGPT, maybe larger is not the best way, and sometimes smaller engines and capabilities can have advantages. And really thank you for this talk and you know, covering all these projects. And this is correct, as David and Prof. Dong also mentioned, that during this week, in parallel to the Cyber Week, we are running a research workshop between Singapore and Israel around the topics and the research that we have in our collaboration program, and it will be concluded this afternoon in a session. So with that, we are exactly on time. And in Europe, and this is a great pleasure to invite to the stage Professor Socrates Katasikas to share with us his research and thoughts. Please.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much, Yanni, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, so the topic of my talk today is about cybersecurity of IT, OT integrated systems. OT meaning we're standing for operational technology. Now, just a few words on where this research that I will give you an overview of is happening. It's part of the research that's happening there. It's the name is NOCICS, short name, Norwegian Center for Cybersecurity in Critical Sectors, and it is a center for research-based innovation on cybersecurity. So it's a public-private partnership. These are the partners in the center. So we have academic partners and user partners. As you can see, well, you might not be aware, of course, of the logos there, but there are a lot of critical sectors represented in the center. And down here below, international collaborators. that are universities across the world. Now, NORCIX has been the spin-off of CCIS, Center for Cyber and Information Security, which is also hosted at the Department of Information Security and Communication Technology at NTNU. NTNU, I wouldn't give you the Norwegian name, is the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. It's the largest university in Norway. So, there are 4 focus areas of research within the center. The center, all of it is about making more secure the digital transformation of industry in Norway. And we have identified, together with our industry partners, 4 focus areas of research, all related to the challenges, cybersecurity challenges with the digital transformation of industry. Now, these are, number 1, IT and OT integration, so challenges because of this. Second one is the use of 5G in the digital transformation of industry and the cybersecurity challenges involved there. Third one, human and organizational challenges because of this digital transformation as regards cybersecurity all the time. And finally, the use of data analytics for enhancing cybersecurity in the digital transformation. So today, I'll give you just an overview of just one of the lines of research within the first focus area, which is about IT and OT. This line of research being pursued by primarily by the research group that I lead at the department in NTNU, which is called Critical Infrastructure, Security and Resilience Group, or CISAR for short. So, just a reminder, or maybe a very short introduction to those of you that are not familiar with industrial control systems, IT, OT integrated systems, cyber physical systems, all these are, well, not exactly equivalent terms, but very similar things. So if you put together IT and on one hand side and OT on the other side, then you come up with what is one way of calling it is an industrial IoT system. And these systems actually are a subset of what we call cyber physical systems that are described by NIST as being systems of systems, because actually you can start, a cyber physical system could be as small as a one chip system up to a huge thing, like, for example, smart city, right? So these are described as systems of systems, and this is where the main motivation for the work that I will give you an overview of starts. Now, these systems have quite a few distinctive characteristics. This is the motivation why we should be looking into the cybersecurity of IT, OT integrated systems rather than just porting or attempting to port solutions that we have for pure IT systems. I won't go into detail into that. There is not enough time to do this, but obviously the slides will be made available so you can have a look at them and think about them. But the end line is that yes, they are quite different than pure IT systems. And only one of these distinctive characteristics, or rather a result of these distinctive characteristics when it comes to cybersecurity, is that we cannot simply look at the well-known CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And we need to expand these attributes of cybersecurity for such systems. This is just one proposal on how to expand them, but I think it makes sense, and it brings together or unites control engineering principles with cybersecurity principles. So, how do we address the overall challenge? Well, one good way of structuring the work is using the NIST critical infrastructure framework, cybersecurity framework for improving critical infrastructures. So again, as a reminder, 5 core functions, starting by identifying needs, protection measures, detection, because obviously now the assumption is not anymore that we can make systems secure. We have to assume that we will be attacked, and therefore we need measures to detect attacks. but also we will be successfully attacked. So we need measures to respond to successful attacks, and some of these attacks will be very successful, so we will need to recover from these attacks. And this is where actually resilience also comes into the picture. So, starting from the identification part of it, one substantial part of the identification of needs to secure comes with risk assessment, of course. And this is one part of this line of research. So risk assessment for cyber-physical systems, industrial control systems. There has been a lot of work on this, but most of the methods that have been proposed are domain-specific. You will not find many CPS or ICS risk assessment methods that are domain agnostic. So we set out to see whether it's possible to come up with methods like this. This was one part of the motivation. The other one comes from a simple thought. Think about how structural engineers or civil engineers, when they build a building, right? Of course, they do know the characteristics and the attributes of the building blocks. And then by putting them together, they will know with a certain degree of certainty, of course, how the overall system, when putting all these systems together, will behave. Can we do that in cybersecurity? I think not. So the overarching, let's say, question about this line of research, which started about 5 years ago, was can we somehow, if we know the cybersecurity characteristics of building blocks of a system, can we use these to determine the cybersecurity characteristics when it comes to risk, in this particular case, of the overall system when they are put together will be. And we've gone, well, quite a lot along this way, but of course there is still much, much more room for research. So we started, first of all, for pursuing the goal of getting domain agnostic risk assessment methods for such systems. We started by modifying the STRIDE method, which surprisingly, even though as you know, has been withdrawn by Microsoft, right? But it's still being used, and surprisingly, it's still the most popular method for threat modeling in industry, including such systems. Modifications, of course, but still it is. But STRIDE is only a threat modeling method. It's not a risk assessment method. Many people make the mistake and confuse threat modeling with risk assessment. That's not enough. So what we did, we also used another method. Yes, Ernesto, you know that, right? That has been withdrawn, but still in use. So if you put STRIDE and DREAD together, and we did modify them, of course, so that they can fit into the industrial control systems, so CPSs, cyber physical systems domain, we put them together and came up with a method that can be used successfully for assessing risk in such systems. But this was not enough because of the disadvantages of STRIDE and of DREAD and any combination thereof. We also tried another approach. So we tried an approach by modifying the attack framework of MITRE, of course, so that it could fit such systems. And we paired this with the FMECA approach for safety. So actually, the idea here is to treat the result of a cyber attack, if we look at it from the other way around, as a failure of a system, and then go back and treat this with a modified FMECA method. Then, next question was, okay, suppose then that you have a complex cyber physical system or industrial control system. Obviously, there are many ways. The usual way of representing such systems is by using graph models, right? But graph models usually represent the interconnections regardless of what kind of interconnections there are in the system. And when we try to analyze those, usually we use metrics of connectivity, like for example, centrality measures, right? But is this the right way to analyze what the critical parts of such a system are? Well, we found that they are not always the best way. We did this by analyzing graph systems like that, by representing them using two types of interconnections between the elements of the system, namely information flows on one hand and control flows on the other hand. So that's where control theory comes together with IT in that sense. And then we applied this idea together with some new measures of criticality in a graph like this to come up with a dependency analysis and an analysis of the critical nodes and of attack paths in a system like this. And we were able to run scenarios where these criticality measures different than the connectivity, the ones related purely to connectivity, gave different results. Then we looked into another question. Are these regular or normal graphs the best way to represent a system like this? The real question being that, yes, we can use layered graphs so as to represent connectivity in both information flows and in control flows, but can we find a unified way of doing that using possibly a different type of graph? And what we experimented with is a type of graphs called bond graphs. I don't assume that many would be familiar with this in the audience. They come from the physical sciences, actually, representing physical processes. So we had to turn this around, and actually we modified bond graphs so that we could accommodate information flows as well. Physical flows are well represented by bond graphs, but not information flows, so we had to modify these and come up with a representation that would be able to account for both kinds of flows. It turned out that this is useful for safety engineers and security engineers when working together. Safety engineers tend not to understand well cybersecurity, and cybersecurity engineers tend not to understand well safety engineering. And in fact, you know that one of the big problems we have when we try to consolidate those is coming up with conflicting requirements. So one way of doing this. And then we use this type of graph to do dependency analysis again, and again we came up with some quite interesting results there. By the way, this is the normal graph of the system, and this is the bond graph of the system, and the system that we used as a use case is this one. It's a power system. We have two main application domains that we're looking at in terms of domains, application domains. One is the power systems, and the other one is maritime, and specifically remotely controlled and autonomous ships. Yeah, that's a slightly different line of research because we had a specific request from industry that is required to use the 62443 standard. That's the main standard for industrial control systems security. But unfortunately, it's not very prescriptive. It tells you what you need to do, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. So we had a request to look into how we can help industry with this, with risk assessment of such systems in a particular application domain, namely unmanned offshore facilities. As you know, Norway is a producer of oil, and the future trend there is to come up with offshore facilities that will not be manned. So this falls into the autonomous or remote controlled domain of research. Going beyond risk assessment, why do we use risk assessment for? Well, for many reasons, of course, but the main one is to come up with identifying security requirements, what we need to protect and how much do we need to protect it. So there are several methods, again, for eliciting security requirements at the design phase for pure IT systems. One of them is the Tropos methodology and the secure Tropos methodology as it has been modified. But this cannot be applied directly to cyber-physical systems. So we modified this. We came up with a method for eliciting security requirements in CPSs, and we used it again in the maritime domain. But then again, the recurring question about how do we put safety and security together came into the picture. So we had to come up with a new modification of this secure Tropos methodology for cyber-physical systems, which combines safety and security. The main advantage of this proposal is that it does not end up with conflicting requirements, simply because we take care of those requirements before they become conflicting requirements. So the method will not result in any conflicting requirements. The usual approach is that we run a safety analysis, we run a security analysis, we come up with conflicting requirements, and then we try to consolidate those somehow to resolve them. Then, coming back to the original question, suppose that we know the risks faced by elements of a bigger system. Can we put them together and find out what the risk of the overall system will be? And the answer is that yes, we can do that. There have been previous works on this particular question, but mostly they don't propagate risk, they propagate likelihood, they don't propagate impact. So this is that. And then the next obvious question is, can we design optimal controls when we do know the overall risk? And again, most of the methods that have been proposed up till now usually look at it from an economic point of view, just minimizing the cost of the countermeasures. We took a different approach, optimization criteria, two of them. One, reducing the cost. Second, maximizing, or rather, sorry, minimizing the residual risk of the process. And we used evolutionary programming techniques here, particularly GAs. Second subline of research, attack detection. This is just a simplified form of an industrial control system. The points with red circles around are points that can be attacked. In one of the projects we run, we created a testbed for a digital substation, and we experimented with attacks on that. This is only one example of the 14 attacks we tested. Some of them, unfortunately, were successful. And that led, of course, to the next question: can we mitigate those attacks? Well, I will skip that. There is a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence in intrusion detection, but I think I'll take a few seconds to talk about it. Well, if you look at the left one, I'm sure that you will all agree that it is a tabby cat, and it has been classified as a tabby cat by several algorithms in the well-known AI or machine learning toolbox, right? I'm also sure that you will agree that this is again a tabby cat, but then you would be wrong, because the same toolbox classified this with a 99% confidence as guacamole. What's the reason behind this? Well, ask Adi Shamir, right? Adversarial perturbation. Question. Okay, I'll skip the rest. Question. Can you trust ML-based techniques to classify an attack or a non-attack? Well, we also know that it's not always the best option to use AI, particularly for intrusion detection in industrial control systems. So physics-based is a better approach, and this is a project that is coming up. We will start in September, looking at this particular concept. I will not talk about test beds that we are building. In fact, we are building a federated cyber-physical range at NTNU around the already existing cyber range, and two projects that are about to start again in September. One is an EDF, European Defence Fund project, actually led by Kongsberg Thomas, fact, right? And another one about, it's a Digital Europe project. So, very quickly, I didn't talk about legacy systems, but this is this bullet here. In fact, we do have many legacy systems in the domain. And this is quite a bit of a trouble when trying to cybersecure existing installations. But I will just comment on this one. This is not becoming better. It will become worse because we have structural problems. We are using the internet, which is an inherently insecure means to connect inherently insecure systems. So there is a lot of work to be done ahead. And we are continuously hiring. So if any of you are interested to work on some open, exciting research problems, and if you like more cool environments, literally, then please consider joining NTNU in our next openings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I have to mention that, each one of our speakers, there is one, complete page at least of the things that I should say as the moderator when I invite each one of the speakers, but we want to dedicate the time for you to hear our speakers, so we're really skipping all the relevant things that can be said on the speakers and just inviting them to the stage. So the next one, she is well known in our community, although she's new to Tel Aviv University, but with a background in the industry and in many other things. So it's my pleasure to invite Professor Anat Bremler-Bar from Tel Aviv University, from the Computer Science School and Faculty. So please.
Okay, so today I will talk about cloud and DDoS attack. 6-7 years ago, I started to think, is DDoS attack is really a problem when the application is in the cloud? Because cloud, there is huge pipe, there is CDN, and this talk will summarize my research in this time. And the answer will be yes, and we will present two new attacks, yo-yo attack and tandem attack, and also give overview of all the situation with DDoS and cloud. It's always evolving because always there is a new architecture in the cloud, and then there is the question, is the new architecture is vulnerable? So my agenda will talk what was the problem of DDoS before there was a cloud? What happened in cloud? I will present our attack, yo-yo attack. And then I will talk about new attack in microservice architecture, which we call tandem attack. And also overview other attacks like glitch attack that are known in the literatures. And then we'll sum up. This talk we will focus on the problem, not on the solution. We have also papers about how to mitigate it, what happened in Kubernetes, but I will skip it because of the time. So why yo-yo attack? I will concentrate it. It was a paper 6-7 years ago, and in the last year I saw headlines in LinkedIn. Yo-yo DDoS attacks, what they are and how you can beat them. Yo-yo attack from Radware, Reblaze, and also in the Wikipedia, I found the terminology yo-yo attack, and they quoted my paper, so it was a very nice surprise. So what is DDoS? Pre-cloud, what is DDoS? Pre-cloud, you have a hardware machine. I will concentrate here on application level DDoS. I will explain why. And in application level DDoS, you overload the machine. You have capacity, there is the good guys, and then come the bad guys. They do overload with requests, and then you have performance degradation until you have a completely denial of service. Why people do it? You know, many reasons. It started in 2000 with this mafia boy, Canadian hacker, and after his attack, me and Professor Yehuda Afek co-founded Rivered Network, a company that dealt with DDoS attack and was acquired by Cisco, and this is why I'm very interested in the subject. Today, the main forces are doing extortion, and I think a new one, I will talk about it, business warfare, and we have also activism and cyber warfare. So, what happened in the cloud, okay? If you think about it, you said, okay, in the cloud, I have a lot of resources. So, I can use auto-scaling mechanism. What is auto-scaling mechanism? In the cloud, you outsource many of the maintenance and infrastructure pains. One of them, you have the ability to add machine, okay, to cope with overload. And as you see here in the figure, usually auto-scaling was designed to cope with the demand over the day. So you pay really what you need. A little bit, I need details, what you're doing in auto-scaling today. The admin defined the auto-scaling by some metric threshold, which says like, if the VM's CPU utilization is above some threshold for some minutes, then add machine. This is the goal, okay? So, can we use auto-scaling as a solution to DDoS? Well, if you look at AWS best practice for DDoS resilience, you will find auto-scaling as number 2. Why? Because they say, now you have overload, no problem, add a machine. Okay, it's good for us, okay? You will pay money, but you still will run, okay? So you pay money, but the business will still run. So what happens? We don't have performance damage, we have economic damage. It's called EDOS or denial of wallet. So before I continue, I want to focus a little bit about the difference between performance damage and economic damage. In enterprise, there are different departments see the damage. Performance damage is the DevOps, economic damage is the FinOps, okay? And it's very different because in today, there is no great finance observability. Many of the enterprise know the information about the money 3, 4, 5 hours after it occurs, okay? Second is the PR, okay? When there is performance damage, we all know because we can monitor it. You say, okay, some business is not in the England. So you have bad PR. But in economic damage, it's really tough to understand how much this attack occurs because it's under the radar, okay? You don't know what happens. And the damage in performance, it's failure, latency, it translates to revenue loss, it translates to reputation damage, but economic damage is direct expense. And also I want to say that the customer is responsible for translation what happened to the application level, okay? So the cloud gives you how much money you spend, but you don't know what exactly in the application suffered the DDoS attack. So before I present our attack, I will talk about the big picture between cloud and DDoS. Cloud helps to mitigate network level DDoS. It has large spikes, it has anti-spoofing mechanism built into the cloud infrastructure. Here we focus on the application level DDoS. It means that we overload the application, the API, the search pages, the login page, and so on. It's not the responsibility of the cloud customer. It's the responsibility of the cloud customer and not the cloud provider, because the cloud provider doesn't know the application you are on. And no remedy from large pipes or cloud or CDN. So now I present our attack, yo-yo attack, and what is interesting in yo-yo attack, that you will have performance damage and economic damage, both of them. Okay. So we will zoom in what happens when you are doing auto-scaling, okay? So in yo-yo attack, you craft wave of DDoS. And so you have overload, the attacker using botnet, sends overload to the VM. And now, after few minutes, and it takes few minutes, okay, the auto-scaling is occurring. In these few minutes, you have performance damage because there is overload. But then, with auto-scaling, you add new machine, okay? We are happy. It costs money, but at least the business is running. But then the attacker can feel that everything is okay, because now the response time is okay, and he stops sending the traffic, the extra request, okay? And then we will perform downscale. You understand why it's called yo-yo, okay? Upscale, downscale, upscale, downscale, and then we will continue to perform this attack. So now you see that you have economic damage and performance damage, and it's harder to detect, and it requires few resources from the attacker, okay? Okay, this is the yo-yo. Okay, so you may ask, Anat, okay, but isn't a theoretical attack? Because you need to do short burst of attack, okay? When we published the paper, it was not common to have short attack. But today, almost half of the attacks are burst attack or wave or attack. They call it also a pulse of attack. This is from Imperva, okay? You see here on attack, off attack, on attack, or off attack. But all this burst attack or pulse attack, everyone said another name, their goal was to be very effective, to take down multiple targets. When he stop attack one, he go to attack another. And also, as you can see here in the headline, the traditional scrubber are confused with short burst, okay? Our attack is aimed on the auto-scaling mechanism, on application which is in the cloud. And because of that, what is important for us is the yo-yo, the fact that you prefer scaling up, scaling down, okay? And it's harder to detect and cost-effective. So, okay, from academia, so we perform a model, but don't worry, I will show you also in practice on AWS that this is can done. So here you have the economic damage. You see here in green, okay, the on attack and then off attack. And here you see the performance damage. And what you can see that it takes here 1 minute until you started to scale up interval because you have an extra overload. In this example, peak extra overload of 2. And then it takes additional 2 minutes until the machine are running because VMs, you know, it takes time to change the software. And in all this time, you have the performance damage. And from here, you have the economic damage. And then you decided when the attacker stopped the attack to do scale down interval. But again, it will take time because there is state that they need to move from the VM. So you pay for all this time for machine, and the attacker will continue. If you compare it with regular DDoS to yo-yo attack, In yo-yo attack, you only half of the time active, but the performance damage, here we measure by extra load, is 1 extra load when the attack is power of 2, and the economic damage is 1.66 when the extra cost of the cloud is twice. So it's very effective, and the attacker, when he stops to attack one victim, he can go and attack another victim, and he can utilize his botnets or his business of attack. This is the result from AWS. You see here the economic damage in number of machines and performance damage in response time and error percent. Okay. So we showed this attack, we showed this also in Kubernetes, and now I want to speak a few minutes about the new attack we present, which is a tandem attack. And tandem attacks speak about the common architecture today in the cloud, which is mean microservice architecture. Microservice architecture means that you don't build the application in monolithics, but with different components that run in different parts in the clouds. And here you can see weeks production. The graph of the microservice and the calling can be very, very huge. And the problem with microservices that every service has a different auto-scaling mechanism. And we call it tandem attack, like in tandem bicycles, because when you run in the bicycles, the speed is detected by the slow participants. And also when you send attack in microservice, what will affect is the slow effective of the service with the slow scaling. So we took serverless service, Lambda, and DynamoDB. Why we took serverless? Because we want to emphasize that even though it's serverless and it should be magic, it's not really magic. You should understand your application. And AWS Lambda scale like this, okay, in a minute. DynamoDB, there are two modes, on-demand and provisioned. We analyzed both of them. It takes time to scale up, minutes, and to scale down. It's a database, it takes time. So I just want you to feel the problem, okay? We have an architecture where one HTTP request trigger one Lambda execution that trigger one write. Very simple. So the auto-scaling of the serverless and the DynamoDB are very different. You have different GUI, and when we will have overload, what will happen that the Lambda will trigger in instantly. The DynamoDB, not. So it will fail, but you will pay for the Lambda because the Lambda succeed, okay? You pay for stuff that won't work, okay? Because the Lambda doesn't know the DynamoDB cannot handle the overload, and so your performance damage and economic damage. Again, we have model and show that there is huge waste here with Lambda that's failed to write and you pay for it. We perform it also on AWS, and when we're using yo-yo attack on the microservices, I will show you the damage. The purple is the time it takes the database to do scale down. It takes a lot of time. The attacker is not active, but you still pay for the database. You also pay for Lambda that, ran but didn't succeed. So you have a lot of waste of money. You have also a little bit of performance damage, and we can analyze where is the pain, but in yo-yo, most of the pain is due to the DynamoDB, scale down, and uncorrelated between the Lambda to the DynamoDB. So the headline, yo-yo DDoS cyber, are they common? So we spoke with people in the industry, and there is yo-yo attack, but there is also another attack, which is interesting, not by us, which is called leech attack. Leech attack is when an attacker sends every day extra load and bit by bit increase the load. And what happened that the organization bleed money, which is very interesting. And we know story of a startup company that looks like this, $500,000, and it took them half a year to understand. So there is a lot to done in this area because you need to detection and solution. This is a summary of the paper I cover, and more papers in my lab, Deepness Lab. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Anat. And you can see how the academic aspects of DDoS and the challenges of the industry combines together, and the academy contribute to the industry, and vice versa. So in that sense, we would like to have אתה רוצה לעלות בלי? אוקיי. אוקיי. אז זה... אתה לא רוצה שאני אעלה מישהו ל10 דקות ואז... Great. So we'll have a quick change, a small change in our agenda, and we'll invite one of the speakers from the later slots to join now. We have while we take care here with the problem with the presentation. So we have on this conference also a slot that we invite young researchers to share with us their research, and we have two in our conference today. And one of the two that will share with us a short slot of a research will be Zeev Kali-Zoner, a researcher and lecturer from Bar Ilan University and the Open University in Israel, and he will share us an interesting topic while we'll take care here with a problem that we had with the presentation and soon continue with our plan. Please, Zeev. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. So I want to start the presentation with saying that I'm from Faculty of Engineering, so I want to say that we can divide the world of science into three categories. One are theoreticians that knows everything but nothing works because they don't do experiments. The second are the experimentalists that have everything working but they can't explain why. And the third are us, the engineers, that is the great combination of the previous two. Nothing works and we can explain why. Yeah. So I would like to share with you our research dealing with nanophotonics and the power of light, that we can use it not only for medical and healthcare purposes, but also for cybersecurity. In this presentation, we will go through our recent published researchers in our faculty under supervision of Professor Zeev Zalewski, who is also the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering in Bar Ilan. And then we will introduce our novel approach for multi-layer optical security interface for gathering all the optical features that we're collecting using light. So, as promised, what if I tell you we can use the power of light to hear people, what they're saying, but not also but also to extract important biomedical parameters that can be helpful for human identification and authentication. So how it's worked. We're using the development of Professor Zeev Zalewski as mentioned before. So the technology is pretty simple, but not simpler. It's including a camera, a laser, and a lens. And we illuminate a certain field of view, and we looked at this field of view with the camera, and then collecting the information using it. So what is the secret sauce? How it's worked behind the scene? It's pretty complex, but I try to do it, to explain it pretty simple. So a random pattern being reflected from the surface of the object that we looked at. And this pattern called, in physics, the speckle pattern. Those random spots are also randomly changed if the object is moving. And we do something behind the scene with the optics. We have this random distribution is not randomly changing, but changing according to a certain set of rules. So when we illuminate a laser to the surface, when the illumination coming back to the camera, we're collecting it using our technology, and then we analyze it. So using this technology, we can track how they changed and compare it to how they should change. And from this information, we know in a very high resolution how the surface is moving. We track how they changed and compare it to how they should change. And from this information, we know in a very high resolution that the object is moving or doing something else that can be very important for analysis and for gathering due to cybersecurity applications. So the surface can be anything. If it's, for example, the surface of the profile of the face, so we can hear what the person has said. If we will illuminate to the area of the chest, so we can listen to the heartbeat and actually collect in real time the heartbeat of the person. And even if we'll illuminate our beam to the back, to the neck of the person, we can also hear what he's saying. So every surface has a different information. We use this technique to listen to people and to extract biomedical parameters like heart pressure, heart beating, glucose concentration, alcohol concentration in blood, intercooler pressure in the eye, even neural activity, and other very important biomedical parameters. So I want to deep dive into our recent 3 published researches. The first one is dealing with photonic human identification based on deep learning of backscattered laser speckle pattern. So as you all know, traditional methods for human identification, such as facial recognition or iris scanning, are becoming increasingly vulnerable to cyber attacks. This is because these methods rely on extraction of specific features from human body, which can be easily spoofed by attackers. So in this research, we proposed a new method of human identification that is more resistant to cyber attacks. This method relies on the analysis of the laser speckle patterns as we introduced it before. A short reminder, those random patterns are generated when the laser is scattered from the surface. In this case, the surface was the forehead of the subject. The unique patterns of the laser speckle pattern are generated the surface microscopic structure, which is different for every individual, and that's what making the uniqueness for the identification and the authentication. The model was able to achieve a pretty high accuracy in identifying individuals within a small predefined number of subjects. In this case, it was 5 subjects for the specific research, and we believe that this method could be used to improve the security of wide range of applications, such as access control, biometric authentication, and even fraud detection. The next research I want to show you is dealing with remote photonic detection of human senses using secondary speckle pattern. This specific research is dealing with real-time sensory neural sensory activity of a human subject. And as we all know, in the healthcare world, the common methods of detecting human senses, such as EEG and fMRI, require expensive equipment and physical contact with the subject. This can be very inconvenient and invasive, especially for long-term monitoring. The use of the secondary speckle pattern for detecting human senses has several cybersecurity advantages. First of them, that this method is more resistant to spoofing than traditional methods. Second, this method can be used to detect human senses in real time, making it suitable for time-dependent application. And third, this method can be used to monitor people without physical contact, like contact-free, making it ideal for application in which physical access is restricted. This specific study was conducted on 8 healthy subject in a wide range of ages and both genders. We were able to successfully identify three basic senses, that is the hearing, smelling, and tasting, from the activity, from the cerebral blood flow activity of the cerebral cortex. And in short, research results suggest that secondary speckle pattern can be used to identify human senses in a non-invasive and cost-effective way. This method also has the potential to be used in a wide range of applications, as well as biometric authentication, fraud detection, and even insider threat detection. The last research I want to share with you actually was developed during the COVID pandemic in Israel, actually in the first period of the pandemic. And the topic of the research is remote photonic sensing of blood oxygen saturation tracking of anomalies in microsaccades pattern. So the blood oxygen saturation is the SpO2, as we all know, and the microsaccades are, in short, very, very, very small movements of the sclera of the eye. So the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a global health crisis, as we all know. One of the challenges was fighting the pandemic is early detection of patients. Our research proposed a new method for remote photonic sensing of blood oxygen saturation via tracking the anomalies of the microsaccades of the subjects, of human subjects, of course. This method can be used to detect COVID-19 patients in a non-contact manner, which is important for preventing the spread of the virus. It's a quick and easy method, which means that it can be used to screen large numbers of people very quickly. This method is important for public health officials who need to track the spread of the virus in a quick manner. And also it's a cost-effective method, which means that it can be used in a resource-limited settings. All our presented research is dealing with pretty cheap equipment. As a reminder, it's pretty simple laser and digital camera, and of course a computer. And last but not least, the eye behavior is an important biomedical feature that could be extracted pretty easily using our technology. So I want to share with you one of the results of the paper due to our real-time application. That, as you can see in the left, your left plot, we can see a normal behavior of the microsaccades of the eye, and when the SpO2 level is normal. And in the right, using the cross-correlation, two-dimensional cross-correlation method, we were able to extract a very unique and strange eye movement behaviors that identify the low rate of the SpO2 of a person that can be a COVID patient. So I want to introduce our novel approach of multi-layer optical security interface, the OSI. Maybe it can sound familiar with the famous OSI model. So the concept is basically the same concept, but instead of dealing with network security protocols, we're dealing with photonics and optical protocols. So traditional security methods, such as mentioned before, face recognition and iris scanning, passwords and PIN codes, are becoming increasingly vulnerable for cyber attacks. Our approach, the MOSI, is a new optical security interface that uses multiple layers of optical information to extract the unique features from the individuals. These features can be used to a variety of security applications. First, individual identification and authentication, as mentioned before. The MOSI can be used to uniquely identify individuals and authenticate their identity. Second, we can use our method for fraud detection. We can use to detect fraudulent activity, such as someone is trying to use someone else's identity to gain access to a system, for example. And lastly, we can use our method for inside threat detection purposes. The MOSI can be used to detect insider threats, such as someone who is under stress or someone who is not behaving normally and should be checked maybe by the officials. Also, this approach has many advantages. First, as mentioned in our all three researchers, it's contact-free, it's scalable, and it's very cost-effective solution for security, making it visible and usable for all of us. So to sum up, the security of the future is here, as can show. Integrated photonics deep learning cybersecurity provides safety at scale that has never been seen before, as we presented the optical layers that can extracting very important features, enhancing security measures, physiological, biometric, cognitive, and sensory activities, combined comprehensive analysis, anomaly detection, and rapid threat response. So I want to thank my incredible advisors and colleagues for their support, guidance, and collaboration. Many thanks to the Faculty of Engineering at the Nanoscience Center in Bar-Ilan University, and thank you for your attention.
See how in our interdisciplinary perspective or approach, we see also physics and mathematics going with the cyber, and we are moving back to our planned agenda. And I'm sorry for this change. We had kind of a problem with the presentation. Sorry, Professor Toch. So our next presenter is also one of the researchers from Tel Aviv University that involved in our collaboration programs with also Professor Yehuda Afek that was mentioned earlier. So it's my pleasure to invite Professor Eran Toch to share with us his research. Eran Toch from the engineering faculty. So please, this is my pleasure to have you here. Please. Thank you.
Hi, thank you everybody. Thank you Yaniv and the ICSC for inviting me to present this research. So my name is actually Eran Toch, and I'm a professor here at the Faculty of Engineering in Tel Aviv University. I'm going to present some work that done mainly by Danny Mosvo, my PhD student, about privacy on the blockchain. If you're interested in what I do, my website is here, and Twitter is a good place to kind of keep track on what's going. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the blockchain and some privacy challenges over there. And then I'm going to talk about our kind of vision of gathering statistics and aggregate models and doing machine learning over private blockchain. And I'm going to present our idea of verifiable differential privacy. So it might be just like a little bit of intro into privacy altogether and to ideas of verifiability. So the blockchain is famous in being not very private, let's say that. It's very easy for hackers, it's very easy for private agencies, it's very easy for governments, for example, as we can see here, to keep track on transactions, to know what kind of money we paid whom, and that's not very surprising because at least the initial blockchain is weirdly public. That's how blockchain transactions, Bitcoin transactions, look at the blockchain. It is not encrypted in any way. I actually don't know why it's called crypto, because it's definitely not encrypted. And you can see which addresses, these are wallet addresses, these are the addresses of people's accounts, had paid how much money, how much Bitcoin or any other coin to other people. And that's there on the internet. That's pretty amazing, right? So there's a reason for that. So blockchain currencies and blockchain systems use universal verifiability as the main idea to keep the blockchain integral and to keep integrity on the blockchain. So everybody could check that actually money was paid to a certain someone. But naturally, the only form of privacy, or at least on the early blockchains, was the fact that the address, like this string here, was private. So we couldn't necessarily link this address to our physical identity, unless, for example, you tattoo it, as some people do. Or you put your wallet address on the internet for everybody to see. But it's not even that difficult. So anyone who, for example, you sat on the date with, and maybe you splitted the bill at the end, or you paid the restaurant, so your date and the restaurant now know your address. And they can know how you spend your money, how much money did you spend, where did you spend it, etc. So basically, if you want to live, if we want to put our money, our transactions, if we want to put supply chains on the blockchain, if we want to put medical data on the blockchain, we need to think about ways to make it at least more private. Because right now, our main way to keep privacy on these blockchains, like Bitcoin and to a certain extent Ethereum, is to do money laundering, basically. And before we get into what we can do, let's just talk a little bit about kind of formally define what do we mean by privacy, because privacy is a very broad term. So on the blockchain, we used to think about unlinkability. So if there's a couple of transactions that I paid for certain things, I don't want these transactions to be huddled together. And there are papers like this paper down here, which is from 10 years ago, but it presented a couple of attacks on unlinkability. For example, we can see on this map all the transactions that a certain person had done. The next thing is untraceability. We don't want those traces, those transactions to be traced back to a specific address, and then at the end there's re-identification. We don't want hackers or anybody else to link that address to our particular identity. So what can be done? There's a lot of work on privacy on the blockchain, and the main contribution is to try to prevent linkability and traceability, etc. So these techniques, start with like ring signature, which is basically a money laundering scheme, right? I mean, in a good way. So you take lots of transactions, you huddle them together, and then it's hard to know who actually paid for what. But more mature technologies include things like ZK snarks, which are zero-knowledge proofs. I'm going to go a little bit into that. And there are quite a lot of companies, some of them Israelis, like Starknet, which take zero-knowledge proofs and kind of make it usable in the real world. So what are zero-knowledge proofs? Why they're considered the kind of the gold standard for privacy on the blockchain? And we have a couple of coins and a couple of networks like Zcash that actually implement zero-knowledge proofs. So it's a way that we can make sure that something had happened, like a transaction had happened, without actually knowing who had done what and how much money was paid. So instead of putting the information on the blockchain, you put on a proof. A proof is a mathematical formula, and when you do the proof, when you check the proof, then you can actually have good guarantees knowing that the proof could only be created if a certain amount was paid from one party to another party. It's kind of hard to explain, well, it is possible to explain how exactly it's been done, but just to give you an example, this is how a proof looks on Zcash. It's this kind of long string, and the proof is, and this string can only be created if the transaction had carried out according to the way it was promised. So it's zero knowledge because, at least in theory, it is impossible to know what had happened if you just look at those proofs, which are on the blockchain. And it's second, which means that it's short enough and the proof doesn't take a lot of complexity to be created and then to be verified. So what's the problem? The problem is actually now we don't have all this information on blockchain. All we have is this bit of random bits, which by design can't tell us anything. And that's a problem if we want to collect statistics. So statistics is extremely important. For example, any modern monetary system that we know relies on statistics to make decisions. For example, the central banks needs to collect information to calculate the index, to calculate מדד המחירים לצרכן in Hebrew, so it can know, if the prices go up and down and maybe increase ריבית, the interest rate, thank you so much, and do other things. And we also need information if we want to check for anomalies, if we want to identify bad transactions and bad actors on the network. So it is extremely important to have some information. And this is, of course, a kind of conundrum because we want transactions to be private, but we still want to collect information. And I think this is crucial if we want blockchain technologies to grow up from whatever they are now to something that banks, supply chains, medical institutions can rely on. So one way to have statistics and aggregated models but still keep people's privacy is through differential privacy. I'm going to kind of present it now, and then I'm going to explain why we still need to do something to it if we want to use it on the blockchain. So differential privacy is basically an idea of adding some noise to the data, but we add noise in a very specific way, in a very calibrated way, using things like Laplace distributions that gives us guarantees that even if we add this noise, if we don't add too much of it, people's privacy is kept hidden while we still can create pretty accurate aggregated models. So we can still calculate the price index. It's used in many places these days. So Apple, for example, actually has the words differential privacy when you sign into like a new iPhone. And it uses it to collect many things. The most kind of cutest one is it uses it to collect information about which emojis you use. And it adds noise to the emoji that you use, so it's hard to track. So if we know that, for example, I'm using a lot of this like emoji, yeah, like this one, and even if people know that, it's hard to get that from the information that Apple collects. More importantly, bodies like the US Census is using differential privacy to release some of the information it collects. In local differential privacy, it's pretty easy. So we have a user. The user has some private value. Let's call it X. It adds noise calibrated by a parameter called epsilon. So if we have if the epsilon is large, we add more noise. If the epsilon is small, we add less noise. Then we have some new value. And then the data analyst collects information from many, many, many users. So that's the X1 to Xn. And then it can create the model. And if the data analyst knows how the noise was added, and if it's taken from the right probability, then it has sufficient guarantees that the data, the aggregated model actually works. The problem is that if we're on a blockchain, it is a distributed environment. There's zero trust, so everybody could add their own noise, and then things can happen. So for example, I can duplicate myself multiple times, do this kind of DDoS attack, and release lots of information which isn't true and doesn't reflect what I do, and therefore I can bias the information collected by the data analyst. So if I want interest rates to go up, then I can just, like create multiple versions of myself and say that I bought very expensive stuff. I can also add whatever noise I want. So if I really care about my privacy and I don't care about statistics that much, I can add huge amount of noise. The data will be totally unusable, but there's no way for the data analyst to know that. On the other hand, users might fear that data analysts will take multiple data points about them and use it to re-identify them. So if, for example, they know that I buy real estate in the US and there are like many real estate type transactions, then it could re-identify me. So we created this system that we call verifiable local differential privacy on blockchains. This is a work, by the way, by Dani Mosvo and Yakov Manevich in IBM Research in Zurich. And we add a certain information bit to the blockchain called DPA. This information can contain is a differentially private value. It could be, for example, whether I'm from the US or not. And without having any type of trust between the user and the data analyst, they can decide together about how much noise to add, and all the parties can get some verifiable proof that the noise was actually added in a way. So this is how it works. The DPA is the data that was analyzed. We propose an algorithm that binds the randomness from which the noise is sampled. And after the parties decide on the noise, then the user creates a proof, a zero-knowledge proof, and that proof can only be created if the noise was actually added in a certain way, and if the noise was only added by a certain user. And we do have a credential system that makes sure that only one copy of the data is created. Okay, so we implemented it using Zcash, and we run a couple of studies basically showing that the proof time, which is the most important thing, doesn't change from regular Zcash transactions. So it can actually work in practice. And the code could be downloaded from here if you want to. So let's just summarize the talk. So first of all, blockchain networks are just insane. The fact that this still happens just blows my mind. I have no idea who thought about it, but I'm just full of awe that it actually worked. Differential privacy is a great way to create data, to mask data, to have it public, but still with strong privacy guarantees. But if we want to use it on the blockchain, then we need to think about a way for non-trustful parties to negotiate in a certain way and to actually have strong proofs that noise was added in the right way. So thank you so much. I was Eran Toch, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eran. And with that, I would like to invite our next speaker. And by the way, things that we touch here, look how differential privacy, other aspects of machine learning, and these things are really, when we'll cover the entire topics of today, we'll see how we've touched most of the kind of more trendy or important topics of our domain. My pleasure now, as we already touched the bio side and in the morning, so now we'll take another aspect of these things, and this is my pleasure to invite Professor Mina Teicher, that was here already in this conference in previous years, talking about encryption and other aspects of mathematics and cyber, and today she's going to talk with us about ethics of brain-machine interface. Professor Teicher is from the mathematics department and brain research center in Bar Ilan University. So please, Professor Teicher. We'll take another minute, and if not, we'll switch speakers as we're approaching the end of our program.
ככה, מי? בסדר.
You can appreciate the fact that you get a fresh
No,
presentation that was made just by a few minutes ago.
תודה רבה על ההזמנה. אוקיי, תודה רבה על ההזמנה. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm always happy to show how mathematics is everywhere. So listening to the first talk about the previous talk about the blockchain, I realized that the T-shirt that I put here is a blockchain company that I belong to, and the electro-optic before, Zalewski was my long-time collaborator in electro-optic. So mathematics is everywhere. That's, now I did my share. To talk about brain-machine interface or brain-computer interface is a topic that we can have a couple of days conference by itself. I'm trying to do it 20 minutes, 19 minutes, 18, 17. So I don't see you. If you want to stop me, you have to sit there. I'll start the introduction by telling you a short story about a teacher that was disabled and he could not, he was paralyzed, and he was always frustrated that he couldn't shake the kids' hands in the graduation ceremony. You know that in the United States, graduation ceremony is an important part of your life. So then an artificial arm was connected to him that was connected to the motor cortex, exactly to the neurons that activate the right-hand arm. So he could, at the end of the year, shake the hands of the students. He was very happy about it, and he shook the hands of everybody. The last one that came on was a girl that was always laughing about his disability. So when he shook her hand, he didn't stop. He kept, the artificial arm kept shaking the hand, and her fingers were broken. If it was a medical conference, you would know that bones in the hands are very difficult to fix. So the question is whom to blame. I mean, he's the one that activated the artificial arm and broke the hand. Maybe it is the neurophysiologist that didn't realize that the neurons in charge that represent frustration are very close to the neuron that activate the right hand arm, so it happened, or maybe the engineer that built it. So this can be a discussion. I have my opinion, but it's up to you. But we need ethics. This question is the least of the ethics issue, just to find the blame, but there are many very difficult issues. I mean, every cultivated normal person, if he gets a letter that addressed to someone else, he will not open it. But a letter that you get in your email that addressed to someone else, that is different, and many people will treat it differently. They will say, actually, maybe it is for me, it says Dear Jim, but maybe it means CC Mary, maybe they wanted me, there's blind CC. So the ethics, even on the internet, is not relevant. This is the revolution of the 20th century, but we are brain-computer 21st revolution. So even the old ethics, technology is advancing much quicker than ethics and moral. It's also to phrase, but also to implement. Just one word about the money. We have to. So government worldwide invest in interplay. East, West, United States, 1.5 billion, the EU, 10 billion, and also a lot of private investors. I only mentioned here two companies that invest a lot of money in brain-machine interface. Of course, Google is there also, but you'll see why I mentioned these. Okay, current BCI, brain-computer interface technologies, are mainly focused on therapeutic outcomes, helping people with spinal cord injuries. So a person can move a cursor of a computer, and he can also operate a wheelchair. Moreover, researchers can already interpret a person's neural activity from functional MRI, not very, very sophisticated, even though people sometimes say. Usually they can say if the person is thinking on a person, on a human being, or an automobile. Many other things. Two special achievements. There is a neuroscientist with ALS that managed to run the whole lab with BCI. He submits grants, he writes papers, he is very, very successful in his work. And three ambitious monkeys from Duke University in North Carolina that created a network of three brains, and together with these three brains, they don't even have to be in the same place because things are moving via the internet. They operate avatars or many other stuff. I had a movie of the three monkeys, but I had to do it on my computer, and that's impossible here. Okay, the future is based on the fact that the scale of number of neurons that machine can read is growing. DARPA mission is to have 1 million electrode reading 100,000 neurons. But even with this mission, BCI is not still part of our daily life. But we are on a way that we will be able to decode mental processes. What is this? What happened in my computer? We will be able to decode mental processes to understand what the person is thinking about, what attention is, many other things. And also, so it's the person in himself, to enhance interaction with the world, physically and mentally, and sensation for people with disabilities or people that want to be superman, superwoman. And also communicate by thinking among individuals, revolutionize treatment when it comes to epilepsy, schizophrenia, brain damage, and in general to transform human experience for the better. So this all sounds good. Why do we need a new ethic? But also what future BCI will be able to do is manipulate intentions, emotion, and decisions. And this is very frightening, of course. But it is more than just manipulate us to vote for the right party. After having electrodes implanted in the brain for treatments like Parkinson, some people have reported feeling of an altered sense of identity. I'm not who I am, I'm someone else. And these have been researched a lot. It's a different feeling, also frightening. So it is clear that future nanotechnology, with or without AI, carries risk to humanity. So to begin to address this deficit, we laid out recommendations relating to 4 aspects of concern: privacy and consent, agency and identity, argumentation, and bias. There are existing ethics guidelines for different things. I mean, there is the Helsinki Code for Medical Experiment, Belmont Report for psychological and behavioral research, and Asel Omar's statement about AI. But all these are not enough when it comes to neurotechnology. I said we. Who is we? We are a think tank that originated by Obama Brain Initiative when he decided that brain is the next mission of the United States. It's a very interdisciplinary. There are people from all fields, people from academia, research, companies. I mean, we have the head of Google Brain there, and also other companies. We discussed the ethics of neurotechnology and machine intelligence, and the draft was published by Nature. So for a mathematician to have a paper by Nature is not something I can forget easily. We are implementing it with OECD, because the idea is that everybody, but with individual countries. And I'll explain later why you have to go country by country. We have already a few countries. The group is mostly men, but we also have some women there. Important. 2 remarks. First of all, the code, whatever we do, will have to be modified, might be modified in different countries and communities, because ethics and moral vary between religion and socioeconomic background, etc., different values. And the second remark is BCI will be in the service of AI. I know AI came up a lot in this conference. But to outperform humans in high brain function, future artificial neural networks will be derived from a better understanding of how real ones work. When I started to do neuroscience 15 years ago, we used 8 electrodes implanted into the brain of a monkey that lived in the Hebrew University. And, but 10 years later, this is already a microscope. This is a movie, but I can't show it here. This is already in a microscope that you can see neurons. These are particular neurons. But more than that, you can, it does work. Anyhow, I'll stop it because the time. And this is a MEG that records the magnetic field induced by electrical activity of the brain. This machine is in Abu Dhabi. They record there, but they send it to Bar Ilan, and we analyze it for epilepsy. That's a lot of neurons are involved. Okay, so the first item is privacy and consent. It's already now, without BCI, things that are relevant to the brain are already, you can already obtain information from people's data train. In 2015, early detection of Parkinson from the way a person is using the keyboard. 2017, early signs of Alzheimer, just from having your smartphone in your pocket, walking around in your daily life. And of course, we know one of the most commercial value is to have target advertised to people to calculate insurance premium or match potential partners, not to let any app do the job for you. They can do better. With neural data on attention, to understand when this person is paying attention or not is even more powerful. And we believe that citizens should have the ability and right to keep their neural data private. So the first 5 have to do with privacy and consent. First of all, the ability to opt out of sharing should be the default choice. We are giving away a lot of information willingly, sometimes by government asking us to do it, but sometimes commercial on social media a lot. So when it comes to neural data, it should be the default choice that they cannot share it. Moreover, sale, commercial transfer, and use should be strictly regulated, almost banned. Like in fertility eggs, you cannot pay too much. Here to pay 0. Such regulation would be analog to the National Organ Transplant Act. And this is a two-way. Restrict the centralized processing of neural data. And this is, of course, and also transparent control of how data is used. You can use blockchain techniques for both of them, smart contract, etc., and very fast. An open data format and open source code would allow for greater transparency about what stays private and what is transmitted. So these are the first 5. And then comes agency and identity. Identity is our bodily and mental integrity, what we think we are. Our agency is our ability to choose our actions. And when we come to manipulate people, of course, as I said, identity change, agency is very dangerous. Some people receive deep brain stimulation, change their identity and agency. BCI can sabotage our understanding of who we are, and for example, by enabling autocomplete or autocorrect. If BCI makes the time between intention and action much shorter, this is autocomplete. And if it can change what we are doing is autocorrect. Of course, people enabled to control devices through the thought across great distances. That's by reading, and also to wire together several brains to work collaboratively. So when we talk about the interdisciplinary era that different people are working together, this is interdisciplinary physically brains. So we believe that identity and agency must be protected as basic human rights. And these are called neuro rights, so we recommend protecting neuro rights, like the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It must be by United Nations in order to have the power to have sanctions when needed. And consent form in clinical and research, when you do, the subject is signing, usually it's only the physical risk of surgery. It should add also mood, personality, and sense of self, the risk to all these things, so people will understand better. Argumentation, there is a pressure to adopt enhancing neurotechnology that allowed people to be radically expand the sensory or mental capacities. Of course, when someone is disabled, you understand it, but people want to be smarter, faster. No one wants to be good, to be better, more good character. DARPA is discussed plans to provide individuals with enhanced mental ability. They call the super intelligent agents. Any lines drawn on augmentation neurotechnology will be very blurry because this is so difficult. So we have to make sure that it will not have negative impact on our life. So we recommend that the guidelines will be very, very strict, and to define the context in which they can be used and for how long they can be used, that it should be strongly regulated for military purposes. Any agreement should be global and sponsored by UN, like the Geneva Agreement for biological weapon and the Atom Agreement on many countries. And there is an international ethics gap. We have to note the international ethics gaps. As I said before, different communities have different morals. And the problem that even with all this, underground activities should happen. So it should be inherent in ourselves that this we don't have to do. And the last and fourth one is bias. Technology can privilege certain group and harm others. We know how female users are getting paid less, how algorithms are predicting and accepting people according to their race. And also, it's clear that defining fairness in a mathematical, rigorous manner is very difficult. So there should be some practical steps to counter bias. And so we are advocates, first of all, to put the forms in, and secondly, for neurotechnology and machine learning, and to have users group already inside the process, so they are in from the beginning. It should be minorities, it can be women, anybody that currently there is a internal bias against it. So I could read the summary, but you remember everything, so I thank you very much, and I think I did it in my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you very much. And yes, you did it in this sports exercise to get to this time slot. And thank you very much. And I can say that even in part of our collaboration research, we are asking ourselves about these ethics aspects, and this is really important. So with that, first I would like to apologize that we are over the time, and it will take us like 14 minutes more to wrap up this conference. And we promised you two young researchers. So one of them was before Zeev, and now it's my pleasure to invite Lior Shafir from Tel Aviv University. He is a network security researcher to share with us his research. So please, Lior.
Hello. I'm going to talk about flow is a set of packets and new approach for early and accurate DDoS detection. And this is a joint work with Professor Avishai Wool and Professor Raja Jiris from Tel Aviv University. In high level, we present in our work a new approach for DDoS detection. This model relies on a tree-based detector, but the main idea behind our work is that this classifier considers a flow input as a set of packets rather than the traditional use of aggregated flow records. And this enables early detection and very early detection with high accuracy. In one of the data sets that we evaluate our work, we show that based on only the first 2 packets of a flow, we are able to achieve very high accuracy. So as a background, all of you know that DDoS attacks remain a major threat on the internet. We hear a lot about DDoS and we see a lot of DDoS, and there is an escalating rise in their size, frequency, and complexity. And today attackers have much more opportunities to launch very destructive and large-scale attacks using botnets and using DDoS to hire as a service. And also there is the number of connected devices far more than we have ever seen before, thanks to the spread of IoT and mobile devices. Now, existing solutions against DDoS usually are implemented on network intrusion detections that use anomaly-based and signature-based techniques. But if we look historically on the evolution of network intrusion detection, then this can be categorized into 2 main types. In the past, we had the packet-based intrusion detection, and in packet-based intrusion detection, all the traffic passes through the detection engine of the intrusion detection, which means that there's a huge amount of traffic that has to be processed, which is not always practical in today high-speed networks. And to address this, a new type of intrusion detection emerged in the last decade, and these are the flow-based network intrusion detection. And in this type of detection, only a fraction of the traffic is collected and passed through the detection engine. Usually this fraction includes the aggregated flow records. And as all of you know, a flow is a stream of packets that share same characteristics. And these flow aggregated records usually include the timestamps, the 5-tuple, and additional statistics about the flow, like the timing and the order of the packets. But these flow-based intrusion detection are still have limitation. And one of the inherent constraints that they have is that the detector must wait for the flow to complete in order to generate or to use this complete flow aggregated record. And we are also talking about machine learning based intrusion, flow-based intrusion detection, and this means that these techniques are based on supervised learning, which means they have to learn the data. And this data usually represents structure and information about complete flows. Another limitation is that the natural structure of these flow records cannot always model and capture fine-grained packet-level information or model interrelation between packets, such as temporal relation and so on. So to address this, we propose a new flow input, which is basically a set of packet headers, and we are talking about a variable length set. Basically, it's a stream of packets, and we show how the usage of this kind of structure allows early detection, because you can choose only a subset, only the prefix of this stream, and use it, feed the detector with only few packets, not wait to the entire flow to complete. And this has a huge potential for early detection and for time saving. As we show later, in one of the data sets, we show how it can achieve a significant time saving of more than 99% in the flow duration. In our case, we also don't inspect the packet payload. We only rely on packet headers, which in average it's about 4 or 5% of the traffic. And we also show that the results of the performance results and the accuracy of our model matches or even outperforms existing state-of-the-art methods. So we talked about a new flow input, but the problem is that usually machine learning algorithms cannot handle sets. They assume that they operate on a fixed record structure, which in our case is a set of packets, and usually what we do in such situation is a feature augmentation. But in our case, we don't want to do feature augmentation because at the end we will still have aggregated flow records. So we employ another model, which is a tree-based model. It's another work by Hirsch et al. Here from Tel Aviv University. And what's unique in this model is it's a tree-based model, but it operates on sets rather than on fixed size record. So, for example, this, if we look on vanilla trees, we are used to that the node in each, the split node is a binary function that operates on a single threshold. But here, each split criterion can operate on a set, and you can see that it's a set-compatible split criterion. And I won't get into details, but different combination here of alpha and beta may represent different statistical functions. Another feature is the attention mechanism, which is basically a pointer we have on each node, which indicates if you want to operate on the original input set or maybe on a subset of packets that are generated as a result of a previous node in the path leading to the current node. And this is a very powerful capability. It allows us to achieve more discrimination power and to have split criterions that cannot be expressed in vanilla trees. So we evaluated our model on two data sets. One of them is shown here. This is the DDoS 2019 data set, which contains more than 50 million DDoS attack across different attack vectors, as you can see here in the table. And the high accuracy that we have is maintained across all the attacked vectors. And here we show also a comparison of our results compared with state-of-the-art in both data sets. One is the DDoS 2019, the second one is IDS 2017, which contains also attack beyond DDoS. And most of the methods that we compare our work are deep learning methods. And you can see that our results are similar or even a bit better than the accuracy results of state-of-the-art methods. But the most important thing is the early detection capability. And if you look here on the on this table, we compare here between the mean duration of flows on several attack vectors. For example, you can see that on the right side of the table, the mean duration of complete flows, if we look, for example, on the TFTP attack, it's above 2 seconds. But if you consider only the first two packets in each flow, we see that the mean duration is only 62 microseconds, which is several orders of magnitude less. It just shows how what is the potential of time saving if we take only the prefix of flows for detection. And you can see here that overall in this data set, if we feed the detector with only 2 packets from each flow, which eventually saves us more than 99% of the time, we reach the same accuracy as detecting and considering the full flow. And this is a very significant result. On the right side, you can see the distribution difference between a substream of 2 packets and the complete flows. It's a logarithmic scale, so on the right side we refer to 100 seconds, the left side is 1 microsecond, but you can see that the distribution of flows in common attacks are significant. And maybe I'll skip this. Here we compare the data set that we use in our method against the one that is used in traditional flow-based methods. We just counted the number of packets and flows in each one of the data set, but we can see that the amount of data that we use is slightly more. And I will end with this slide, so thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Lior. And with that, we really conclude our morning here with the academic conference with 11 speakers that really took us to a journey within the interdisciplinary domain of cyber, within the top and the most innovative concepts and ideas. And I think this is, it was really fascinating. I would like to thank the speakers for coming all over, from all over the world to share with us these great thoughts. I would like to thank Ronit, that was my partner within the last few months to prepare this event, and today with all the changes and things like this. And to thank you, our audience, for spending with us the morning, listening to the talks, asking and having great discussions during the break and before. And I wish you a great Cyber Week, a great stay here in Israel, and thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.